Chapter 2594. Yu Siqing slowly walked out of the house. After seeing the two large words on the wall outside, her face couldn't help but turn gloomy. Revenge? The other party was here to seek revenge? For a moment, thousands of thoughts ran through Yu Siqing's mind. All these years there were many situations where she didn't save people, but there weren't many situations where she took the initiative to offend people. This was because she had always stayed in the Yu clan and rarely left. In this world, the people who hated her the most were Mu Jin's, Mu Lingbing, and the others. However, they already didn't have the chance to seek revenge, so there was no need to worry. Therefore, there was only one possibility for the person who came to seek revenge, and that was the person she didn't save. However, she didn't know how many people she didn't save, so there was no way to determine who came to seek revenge. Ji Lishue and the others were originally in a heavy mood. When they suddenly saw Yu Siqing come out of the house safe and sound, they couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. So nothing happened to Grandmaster Yu Siqing. Where did Elder go now? Yu Siqing turned to look at Yu Taotan. She didn't hear any movements earlier, so she could only judge everything from Elder's position. Elder should have gone to chase after the person who left. Yu Taotian said slowly, Siqing, is there really no movement at your place? The other party had come for Yu Siqing. Could it be that before they could do anything, they had already been discovered by the elders and forced to leave? Yu Siqing nodded. I didn't notice any movement. At least, no one entered my house. How is Qingyan? Yu Siqing's gaze turned to Ji Lishue. Lan Qingyan lived in the same courtyard as her. Perhaps the other party's target wasn't her, but Lan Qingyan. Ji Lishue couldn't help but be startled when she heard this. She quickly walked towards Lan Qingyan's house. At this moment, Yu Manlan walked out of Lan Qingyan's house, her face filled with worry. When did the Yu clan's defense become so weak? Even a stray cat or dog can come in and cause trouble. Yu Manlan hurriedly rushed out after hearing Elder's voice. The first thing she did was to confirm Lan Qingyan's safety. These days, Lan Qingyan was already tortured beyond recognition. If she were to be framed again, it would be too miserable. Fortunately, nothing happened to Lan Qingyan. However, the events of the past few days had already caused Yu Manlan to be extremely vexed. Therefore, her words were not pleasant to hear. Following Yu Manlan's words, Yu Taotian and Yu Siqing both frowned. Their expressions were cold. If Madame Lan thinks that our Yu clan's defense is not strong enough, why don't you just return home? Yu Siqing's words were not polite at all. Yu Manlan was just a junior, yet she dared to speak so impolitely. Yu Manlan was slightly stunned. She looked at Yu Siqing and Yu Taotian in astonishment. Just now, she recalled that there were so many people around. Her accusation just now was really inappropriate. However, she did not choose her words carefully, which was why she said those words. Looking at the cold faces of Yu Taotian and Yu Yang, it was obvious that it was useless for her to explain further. And I didn't mean that. I'm just worried that something might happen. An awkward expression appeared on Yu Manlan's face. Although Yu Siqing had no way to remove the poison in Lan Qingyan's body, she could at least help Lan Qingyan extend her life. Chapter 2595. Yu Siqing snorted coldly. Her face was cold as usual. Obviously, she didn't care about Yu Manlan's explanation. Ever since Yu Manlan came, she had been disturbing her life. The reason why she was willing to treat Lan Qingyan was because of their blood relationship. However, Yu Manlan didn't know how to be grateful. On the contrary, she had a lot of opinions. If it wasn't for Lan Jingquang's gift, she would have driven Yu Manlan away. If it wasn't for Lan Qingyan being too noisy these days, she wouldn't have used her origin energy to seal her ears. As a result, she didn't notice this immediately. Yu Siqing didn't give Yu Manlan any face at all. She directly humiliated Yu Manlan in front of so many juniors. Yu Manlan was very sullen, but there was nothing she could do. It was true that she didn't control her temper just now. She couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. Yu Siqing was always so high and mighty. In terms of status, she wasn't inferior to Yu Siqing at all. Yu Siqing had always looked at her with the same eyes as before she was married. This made her extremely dissatisfied. Yu Taotian's face was gloomy. Although he was very unhappy, he didn't make a fuss about this matter. The most important thing now was to know if the Yu clan suffered any losses. Siqing, are your disciples here? Did they suffer any losses? Yu Siqing also turned to look at Ji Lishue and the others. She found that Xianyi wasn't in the crowd and frowned. Where is Xianyi? Ji Lishue and the others were stunned. Previously, they were only thinking about Yu Siqing's possible death, and didn't have time to pay attention to anything else. Only when Yu Siqing asked did they remember that they hadn't seen Xianyi's figure. Master, I'll go take a look. Ji Lishue bowed. After receiving Yu Siqing's affirmation, she hurriedly rushed to Xianyi's residence. When Ji Lishue arrived, she found that the house was empty and there were no signs of disorder. Obviously, they had left long ago. Master, Xianyi isn't in the house, Ji Lishue replied truthfully. Hearing Ji Lishue's words, everyone couldn't help but be in an uproar. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Could it be that the person who came for revenge is Xianyi? I saw that Xianyi had always been very honest and steady in his work. He didn't reveal any clues at all. Could it be that Xianyi was kidnapped? Ji Lishue had a complicated expression on her face. She had gotten along well with Xianyi over the past month. However, she always felt that Xianyi was somewhat unfathomable. It was as if there was a layer of mysterious gauze draped over his body. It was hazy and could not be seen clearly. After everything that had happened today, she suddenly felt that it might have something to do with Xianyi. Perhaps this was the place that she had been unable to see clearly all this while. Yu Siqing's expression gradually changed from gloominess to astonishment and finally to rage. She had always been wary of Xianyi because Xianyi's background was unknown. Even though she had sent people to investigate Xianyi's identity, she still did not find any clues. However, according to Xianyi's behavior these days, he didn't seem to have any intentions at all, so she gradually let down her guard. She didn't expect such a thing to happen today. She had a hunch that this was Xianyi's doing. Chapter 2596. Is there a problem with the newly recruited Xianyi? Looking at Yu Siqing's change of expression, Yu Taotian understood the gist of the matter. However, Yu Siqing did not reply immediately. She only said indifferently, "Let's wait for the elder to return before making a judgment." Even though she had already determined the result, she still had to wait for the elder to return before making a definite judgment. Yu Taotian nodded. His thoughts were complicated. Xianyi's performance in the recruitment assembly was obvious to all. He thought that recruiting Xianyi would become another golden signboard of the Yu clan. He did not expect that not only did it not become a golden signboard, but it also brought back his enemy. Once this news spread out, it would be a huge loss of face for them. Just as Yu Taotian was pondering, the elder had already returned to the Yu clan with a dejected look. Seeing that Yu Siqing was safe and sound, the elder could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Siqing, luckily you are fine. Yu Siqing nodded, answering the elder's words. However, from the elder's complicated and helpless expression, she had a bad premonition. Elder, did you catch the other party? Yu Taotian's voice was slightly hoarse as he asked. The elder shook his head. The other party's speed was very fast. I chased them all the way, but they still managed to escape. With your speed, how could the other party escape from your hands? Yu Siqing was in disbelief. Even though she knew that Xianyi's strength was not bad, it was impossible for his speed to be comparable to the elder's. The guardian elder's strength was something that the entire Yu clan had witnessed. Xianyi was only around 20 years old. How could his strength be comparable to the elder's? This is the truth. The other party's speed was extremely fast. He was even faster than me. The group of doctors and poison masters could not help but gasp. None of them expected Xianyi to be such a top-notch expert. Ji Lishue's pupils shrank. Xianyi's strength was so strong that it would be easy for him to kill her. Fortunately, she was not too proud of Yu Siqing's closeness to her these days. Otherwise, she would have gone to hell to meet the king of hell. The other party left directly and did not kidnap anyone, right? Yu Siqing's voice was slightly cold. She had always prided herself on being smart, but she didn't expect that someone would act under her nose and she would be deceived. Kidnap? The hall keeper elder frowned, then shook his head. No, if the other party kidnapped someone, they wouldn't have done it so quickly. The result was obvious. Yu Taotian couldn't help but sigh with a complicated expression. I didn't expect Xianyi to have such good acting skills at such a young age. After pausing for a second, Yu Taotian continued, from the looks of it, Xianyi must have known that you used your essence force to cover your ears and wanted to take this opportunity to make a move on you. I didn't expect to be discovered by the guardian elder, so I had to leave before I could do anything. Yu Xiqing nodded. From the looks of it, this should be the case. Although they had accidentally recruited Xianyi into the Yu clan, they didn't suffer any losses. This was already a great fortune amidst the misfortune. Yu Manlan heaved a sigh of relief when she heard all of this. Fortunately, the problem wasn't serious. Chapter 2597. Hearing that, the elder's expression changed. He couldn't help but smack his forehead, his face filled with frustration and nervousness. Shit! I've forgotten the most important thing. Yu Taotian and the rest looked at the elder. They were originally relieved, but now their hearts were in their throats again. I heard the commotion in the martial skills hall and hurriedly chased over. In the process of chasing, I saw the word revenge written on Xiqing's residence. I hurriedly shouted and continued to chase. I wonder how the martial skills hall is now. The elder had been so engrossed in talking that he had forgotten the most important thing. At this moment, almost everyone's expression changed. Everyone thought that Xianyi was here to take revenge on Yu Xiqing. They didn't expect her to make a move on the martial skills hall. According to what you said, Xianyi wasn't the only one. She had other helpers? The elder nodded and said in a deep voice, I chased 2 auras from the martial skills hall and sensed 2 more auras here. They should have met up here and left together. Let's go to the martial skills hall to take a look. Yu Taotian's hoarse voice had a hint of sharpness because he was anxious. The martial skills hall was the most important place in every clan. It was fine if there were no losses. However, if the martial skills hall was damaged, it would be terrible. The elder didn't dare to delay. His mission was to guard the martial skills hall. If the things in the martial skills hall were lost, he wouldn't be able to escape the blame. In the next second, Yu Taotian the elder and the rest rushed to the martial skills hall. In this 1 year, their Yu clan had met with terrible things one after another. After Yu Taotian and the rest left, the doctors and poison masters who were left behind were in an uproar. Oh my god, I didn't expect Xianyi to be here for revenge. If she killed Master Yu Xiqing, it would really be... I wonder if the martial skills hall suffered any losses. Seems like this was a planned conspiracy. She even became Master Yu Xiqing's disciple. This news is really shocking. Jilashua, you spent the most time with Xianyi. Did you notice anything? Everyone's gazes landed on Jilashua, wanting to know more about her. Jilashua quickly shook her head. I'm the same as you guys. I don't know anything at all. I still find it hard to believe. Now, she was almost certain that the man who came with Xianyi was also one of the people involved. Their guts were really too big. Facing a colossus like the Yu clan, ordinary people wouldn't even have the courage to provoke them. Xianyi and the others actually dared to infiltrate the Yu clan to take revenge on Yu Xiqing. They were really too powerful. When everyone arrived at the martial skills hall and saw everything in the martial skills hall, even someone as calm as Yu Taotian almost fainted. That was because the huge martial skills hall had been emptied. In the entire martial skills hall, other than some of the lowest grade martial skills, everything else including the medical books had been taken away. With its empty appearance, no one would be able to connect this place with the martial skills hall that was previously filled with martial skills. How could this be? Yu Taotian almost fainted. This was a loss that the clan could not bear. Chapter 2598. The guardian elder was also dumbfounded. He felt suffocated and found it hard to breathe. Previously, when he heard a trace of movement, he immediately chased after them. However, looking at the situation in front of him, it was obvious that the other party had already moved most of the things in the martial skills hall. Not only that, the other party had left behind some low-level martial skills, not because they didn't have time to take them away, but because they felt that their levels were too low. He had been the guardian elder for so many years. He had also met some fellows who had designs on the martial skills hall. All of them were discovered by him, and were punished by the Yu clan. However, this time something so serious had happened while he was guarding the martial skills hall. The entire Yu clan's foundation was destroyed. He couldn't absolve himself from the blame even if he died. Yu Siqing looked at the scene in front of her in a daze. The severity of the situation was completely beyond her imagination. Compared to the losses that the Yu clan suffered last time, this was a devastating blow. Yu Taotian finally couldn't take it anymore and fainted. He could only hope that this was all a dream and not reality. Unfortunately, a dream was a dream after all. It was impossible to hope that something that had happened didn't happen. Yu Manlan, who was following behind Yu Taotian and the others, was also shocked. She couldn't understand what kind of enemy the Yu clan had recently offended to cause this disaster wave after wave. She wasn't an ignorant person. After living in the Lan clan for so many years, she had some understanding of the clan's affairs. The martial skills and techniques in the martial skills hall had all disappeared. Even if the Yu clan could remember some of them, it would be impossible to maintain their previous prosperity and prosperity. Who exactly did you offend? Yu Manlan couldn't help but ask. Although she had married into the Lan clan and became a part of the Lan clan, the Yu clan was still her maternal family. If something happened to the Yu clan, it wouldn't be good for her. Originally, she had relied on the Yu clan to have some status in Lan Jingquang's heart. Once the Yu clan was no longer the same as before, her future would definitely not be easy. Yu Siqing, who was already in a terrible mood, couldn't help but look at Yu Manlan with disgust after hearing this. I think you should consider whether you brought your enemy to the Yu clan. Otherwise, why would the Yu clan be in trouble every time you come? Hearing this, Yu Manlan couldn't help but be stunned. Thinking about it carefully, this was indeed the case. Previously, before they came, the Yu clan had been living in peace. However, when they came, such a situation happened. Could it really be a coincidence? However, if the other party's enemy was her, then they should have gone to the Lan clan for revenge. Why would they attack the Yu clan's martial arts hall? Yu Manlan didn't understand, but she didn't dare to make a sound. Yu Taotian was carried back. This blow was too great. Instinctively, he didn't want to wake up. The news that the martial arts hall had been plundered completely quickly spread throughout the Yu clan. Paper can't wrap fire. As long as someone came to the martial arts hall, they would know everything. In a split second, the Yu clan was shaken. Everyone found it hard to accept this. The elders of the Yu clan gathered in the martial arts hall, but when they saw the empty bookshelf, they sighed. An indescribable anger exploded in the hearts of the Yu clan members. The other party's actions had really crossed the bottom line of their Yu clan. Chapter 2599. The Yu clan immediately issued an arrest warrant for Xianyi. Xianyi's portrait was immediately spread throughout the entire Yutian city. Xianyi had done such a despicable thing. If the Yu clan did not cut her into pieces, they would never be able to appease their anger. However, while the Yu clan was chasing after them, Bailey Hongzhuang had already recovered her original appearance. She was walking confidently on the road back to Limitless Palace. She was in a good mood. Even when she was rushing back, the corners of her lips would occasionally curl up. My wife is in a good mood? Di Beichen smiled as he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. His extremely black eyes were deep and alluring. His warm and magnetic voice was filled with a different kind of charm. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows as her lips curled into a faint smile. I was thinking, when Yu Taotian and the rest saw the looted martial arts hall, their reactions would be spectacular. Long before, Xiao He and Xiao Bai had already told Bailey Hongzhuang about their loot. Other than a few low-level martial arts techniques that Xiao He and Xiao Bai did not care about, they had already moved everything else over. Glancing at the martial arts techniques in the Chaos Ring, Bailey Hongzhuang was sure that the Yu clan's precious martial arts techniques and medical books were all here. My vision went black. Di Beichen said concisely. They should have sent people to kill us by now. Bailey Hongzhuang laughed softly. It's a pity that they are destined to not be able to find us. Next, she should look forward to the poison acting up and the Yu clan's destruction. The reason why no one dared to offend a poison master was because once a poison master's poison skills reached the pinnacle, they would be able to destroy a large force without sacrificing a single soldier. Yu Siqing had been proud of this for so many years. She would completely defeat Yu Siqing on this point. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Now I finally don't have to stay in the Yu clan, that disgusting place. Facing Yu Siqing's ugly old face all day long, my appetite has decreased quite a bit. Xiao He sighed faintly and looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle. Her bright eyes deliberately made a sorrowful expression. Xiao He, you've put on weight again. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't mind exposing her. If Xiao He had said anything else, she might have believed her, but when it came to food, he couldn't believe it at all. To this guy, nothing was more important than food. Xiao He was stunned and her face immediately fell. Master, can't you cooperate with me? This is a great time for me to show my loyalty. I'll reluctantly cooperate with you if you change your excuse to show your loyalty. But this reason is really intolerable. Bailey Hongzhuang wrung her hands. As the master of the three gluttons, she had already recognized this truth a long time ago. Di Beichen's lips curled into a clear smile. Bailey Hongzhuang was already in the mood to joke around. It could be seen that she was in a good mood. My wife, after the Lan clan's matter is settled, we should prepare for the big wedding. Di Beichen's dark eyes were filled with ripples as he stared at Bailey Hongzhuang. Marrying Bailey Hongzhuang grandly was something that he had been thinking about for a long time. At that time there were many reasons in front of them, so they had no choice but to temporarily put everything aside and complete their unfinished business. But now that everything had been taken care of, all they had to do was wait for everything to be completed. Then, he could legitimately hang the exclusive rights over Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 2600. Bailey Hongzhuang blushed as she looked at the side profile so close to her. Then she raised her eyebrows playfully. My status now is different from before. If you want to marry me, it won't be enough if you don't have enough betrothal gifts. My entire being belongs to my wife. What else does my wife want? Bailey Hongzhuang supported her chin with her index finger and pretended to be deep in thought. Then I'll have to think about it. Di Beichen looked at the mischievous and adorable girl in front of him. His heart couldn't help but waver. In the next second, before Bailey Hongzhuang could come to a conclusion, she felt the world spin around her. Her waist was tightened and a scorching palm was wrapped around her slender waist like a soldering iron, forcing her to come closer. Di Beichen bent down and kissed Bailey Hongzhuang fiercely on her bright red and tender lips. Bailey Hongzhuang was caught off guard. Her lips were easily pried open and he drove straight in. This kiss was gentle. There was a trace of domineering possessiveness in the tossing and turning, playing along with her. Bailey Hongzhuang was tightly held in Di Beichen's arms and couldn't move. She felt the cool and refreshing breath and gradually went along with the kiss. Xiao He and Xiao Bai covered their eyes again. Bai Shi also turned his head immediately. The three beasties pretended not to see anything and walked forward, chanting in their hearts, "See no evil, see no evil." I feel that it won't be long before Di Beichen seduces Master and brings her home. Xiao Bai seduced? Didn't they seduce him long ago? Master was targeted by Di Beichen not long after she transmigrated. Bai Shi, sinister, too sinister. The most pitiful one is Mo Yunjue. Xiao He. But speaking of which, there will definitely be a lot of delicious food at Master's wedding. I'm really looking forward to it. Xiao Bai. That makes sense. Bai Shi. When Di Beichen let go of Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but lean into his arms and pant. Her body felt weak and she could only stand up by leaning on him. Of course, Bailey Hongzhuang would never admit this. Wife, I've been cultivating my self-control for so long. Now that I finally had the chance, it was interrupted by a resentful husband who ran away from home. Don't you want to marry me earlier? So that I can be liberated? When she heard the first half of Di Beichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but stare, not understanding what he meant. But after hearing the second half of the sentence, Bailey Hongzhuang's face quickly turned red like it was burning. If it was crimson before, it was now so red that blood could be squeezed out. A resentful husband who ran away from home. Wasn't this referring to Wenziren? It must be that time. You're really getting more and more overboard. Bailey Hongzhuang tried her best to pretend to be serious, but under Di Beichen's penetrating gaze, all the disguises were invisible. Obviously there was no use. Wife, you're shy. Wife, do you agree to marry me? What if I don't? Then I'll announce it to the world. What's the use of you announcing it to the world? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen mockingly. She had been bullied by Di Beichen for so long. She had to find a chance to turn the tables. Otherwise, wouldn't she be defeated by Di Beichen? During the Battle of Zhualu, when Xiao Feilin and the others called you young madam, you didn't reject them. Even if you didn't announce it to the world, everyone would know. Chapter 2601. Just as the Yu clan was furious and announced to the world that they were going to kill Xianyi, another disaster broke out in the Yu clan. The Yu clan's disciples suddenly contracted an acute illness and fell down one after another. It was like a plague, sweeping through half of the Yu clan in a short period of time. Yu Taotian had yet to recover from the fact that the martial arts hall was emptied out when the outbreak of the plague gave him another fatal blow. The previous poisoning incident had already dealt a huge blow to the Yu clan. Even though a few months had passed, they still hadn't recovered. Who would have thought that it would happen again this time? Moreover, the scale seemed to be even bigger than the previous time, and the damage was even more terrifying. Yu Taotian didn't even have time to think about how to deal with the robbery of the martial arts hall. He immediately rushed to Yu Xiqing's residence. Xiqing, do you have a way to neutralize this poison? Yu Taotian, who was usually calm and collected, was now filled with anxiety and hope as he looked at Yu Xiqing. Whether the Yu clan could survive this crisis depended on Yu Xiqing. Yu Xiqing's expression was very ugly. She had already seen the condition of the disciples who were poisoned. This was definitely not a simple poison. Clanmaster, I'm afraid this situation is very difficult to resolve. Yu Xiqing's voice was low. She had always boasted that her medical and poison skills were very strong. However, in this 1 year, she didn't know why she had come into contact with so many poisons that were beyond her expectations. Even with her strength, she couldn't neutralize these poisons. The other party's poison skills were obviously a level higher than hers. This was a conspiracy that targeted the Yu clan. As Yu Xiqing's voice fell, Yu Taotian took a few steps back until he touched the wall. The other party's poison skills are above mine. They deliberately poisoned the disciples to make the Yu clan helpless. I studied it just now and realized that I couldn't even differentiate the basic ingredients of the poison. The poison acts very quickly. I'm afraid the disciples won't be able to hold on for long. Even if I really think of a way to neutralize the poison, it would be too late. Under such a dangerous situation, Yu Xiqing didn't hide anything. Because if she did, the Yu clan's situation would be even worse. So our Yu clan is hopeless? Yu Taotian raised his head with difficulty. His hoarse and deep voice was trembling uncontrollably. Their Yu clan had stood tall in the Shangxian continent for so many years. Could it be that they were going to be destroyed because of this disaster? FFF, Yu Taotian couldn't hold it in any longer. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his aura weakened. As the clan master of the Yu clan, he had never thought that there would be such a day. If that was the case, how was he going to face his ancestors in the underworld? Yu Xiqing hurriedly supported Yu Taotian, clan master. Now that things have come to this, we can only ask the uninfected Yu clan members to leave quickly. Facing such a terrifying poison, Yu Xiqing no longer had the confidence to fight against it. She could only retreat quickly so that the Yu clan would not be completely annihilated. Yu Taotian's hands were trembling and his eyes were bloodshot. Is there really no other way? I will think of a way to neutralize this poison, but in order to minimize losses we can only retreat first, Yu Xiqing said in a low voice. Yu Taotian stood up shakily and walked out of the house slowly. Chapter 2602. Yu Manlan panicked after knowing that the plague had broken out in the Yu clan. She hurriedly rushed to Yu Xiqing's residence. Just as she reached the door, Yu Manlon heard the conversation between Yu Taotian and Yu Siqing. She couldn't help but be shocked. Even though she saw the terrifying speed of the outbreak of the plague, she didn't expect the situation to be so serious. If the Yu clan was really going to collapse like this, then she had to leave with Qingyan quickly. Lan Qingyan was already heavily poisoned, and her body was extremely weak. If she was infected with the plague now, she would really die. However, if they left directly, without Yu Siqing, Lan Qingyan's life would also be lost. Fortunately, Yu Siqing also suggested that everyone should evacuate together. As long as they evacuated together, there was no need to worry. Thinking of this, Yu Manlon couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. This could be considered a great fortune amidst the misfortune. "Aunt, let me help evacuate." Yu Manlon looked at Yu Siqing's expression and asked carefully. Yu Siqing glanced at Yu Manlon indifferently. This time she didn't say anything. The outbreak of the plague in the Yu clan was sudden. Just a day ago, the Yu clan was still aggressively saying that they wanted to kill Xianyi. The next day, the entire Yu clan was like a stray dog and could only choose to migrate. Ji Lixue and the other doctors and poison masters were completely dumbfounded after seeing this scene. After knowing that Xianyi had ransacked the Yu clan's martial arts hall, they were already full of admiration for Xianyi's ability. However, none of them thought that Xianyi could actually create such a huge commotion in the Yu clan. It was really too terrifying. How much hatred does Xianyi have with the Yu clan? He wants to destroy the entire Yu clan in one fell swoop. Why are we so unlucky? It wasn't easy for us to enter the Yu clan through the recruitment assembly. We were still looking forward to shining brightly in the future. Now that the Yu clan has become like this, what should we do? I heard that even Master Yu Siqing couldn't cure this poison. Could it be that Xianyi's poison skills are more powerful than Master Yu Siqing's? Everyone was discussing this matter. They didn't expect such a thing to happen. Now they were like ants on a hot pan. They didn't know what to do. No one came to tell them what to do next, and they didn't dare to go out and ask. It would be terrible if they were infected. They could only deduce from the situation in front of them that the Yu clan had the intention to migrate. Ji Lixue couldn't help but look a little flustered. After witnessing Xianyi's medical skills, she was very impressed. It was just that he did not expect Xianyi's poison skills to be so powerful. It seemed like Xianyi had been hiding it all along. She felt that Xianyi must have an extremely powerful master. Otherwise, how could the young Xianyi be nurtured to such a level? At this moment, she was somewhat envious of Xianyi. She had been following Master Yu Siqing for a month, but Master Yu Siqing had not taught her anything. According to her understanding, she didn't know how long she would have to wait for Master Yu Siqing to truly teach her. In the past, she had always worshipped Master Yu Siqing. However, ever since she entered the Yu clan, she realized that many things were different from what she had imagined. Chapter 2603. Suddenly, Ji Lixue saw Yu Ruilin, who was not far away, and her eyes lit up. Just as she was about to ask Yu Ruilin about the Yu clan's current situation, she saw Yu Ruilin glance at her and leave the Yu clan's territory with the others. Seeing this, Ji Lixue couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. Speaking of which, it was best to see a person's sincerity at such a crucial moment. Obviously, Yu Ruilin only had himself in his mind at such a moment. At this moment, Yu Siqing walked out of the house and looked at Ji Lixue and the others. "Pack up and get ready to leave." Hearing this, Ji Lixue and the others couldn't help but be stunned. Seemed like their guess was right. Yu Siqing obviously didn't have the mood to talk to Ji Lixue and the others. The most important thing now was to quickly evacuate the Yu clan's disciples. The longer they stayed here, the greater the Yu clan's losses would be. Now that the Yu clan's decline was unstoppable, the only thing they could do was to reduce their losses and give the Yu clan a chance to rise again. However, he did not know when he would be able to make a comeback. "Clanmaster, this is definitely a conspiracy. I think it's very likely that it's the same group of people from the previous time." The Yu clan great elder's face was filled with grief and indignation. How glorious was the Yu clan normally. Now the entire clan was fleeing like a stray dog. If this news were to spread, It would really be a disgrace to the clan. As soon as he said that, Yu Taotan and the others' faces changed. I also think that it's very likely. The other party's methods are not much different from the previous time. It's just that this poison is more powerful than the previous time. They came prepared. Yu Xiqing spoke slowly in a deep voice. This thought had been circling in her mind. These two matters were shockingly similar. The only difference was that the other party was obviously in a hurry the previous time, but this time they came prepared. Therefore, the destructive power this time was much more terrifying than the previous time. Who exactly is this Xianyi? How did our Yu clan offend her to the extent that she would do such a vicious thing? Yu Taotan punched the table fiercely, and the entire table instantly shattered into pieces. The other party's methods were too sinister. If it was a direct confrontation, they could at least be somewhat prepared. However, everything was carried out in secret. When they discovered it, it was already too late. To think that their dignified Yu clan would be destroyed in such a short period of time. It was really too unacceptable. The Yu clan's elders also had a gloomy face. Up until now they still felt as if they were in a dream. They had just woken up from a nap. How did everything change so quickly? I shouldn't have recruited Xianyi this time. His strength is so outstanding, there must be a problem. The second elder's face was gloomy. A kind of unwillingness and anger spread in his heart. How glorious were they usually. In the future, they would not to the clans up. In the future to face to meet people to is blame to say s to say. Chapter 2604. Father, where are we moving to? Yu Manlan had already asked the Lan clan to prepare a palanquin and settled Lan Qingyan down. She didn't want to stay here any longer. If she lost her life here, it wouldn't be worth it. However, she could only move with Yu Xiqing now. This was the only way to save Lan Qingyan's life. Where should they move to? This was also the problem that Yu Taotian was having a headache about. With the outbreak of the poison, their losses were huge. However, there was still a certain number of descendants left. If they went to other places, they might not be able to find a place to settle down. It was really troublesome. At this moment, Yu Xiqing looked at Yu Manlan indifferently and said, "Why don't we move to the Lan clan temporarily?" Yu Manlan couldn't help but be stunned. She didn't have such an idea. Now the entire Yu clan was like a stray dog. With such a huge troop, if they went to the Lan clan, wouldn't it bring great trouble to the Lan clan? Moreover, no one knew who was infected by the poison. This poison was like a plague that was contagious. If the Lan clan was implicated because of this, what should they do? She was almost certain that if Lan Jingquang knew about this, he would fly into a rage. That was something she couldn't bear. However, before Yu Manlan could reject, Yu Taotian and the other elders' eyes lit up. The Lan clan has a huge business and is related to us by marriage. It's only right for them to help us. The first elder of the Yu clan said slowly, "As long as we go to the Lan clan, we won't be disturbed by other forces. It's really an excellent choice." The Yu clan's second elder also had a face full of approval. Originally they didn't know where to go, but now that they thought of the Lan clan, this was really the best choice. Although the Yu clan had nurtured many outstanding doctors and poison masters over the years and had formed some good karma, there were still hostile forces. Once they knew that the Yu clan had fallen into such a situation, they would definitely hit them when they were down. Once that happened, the Yu clan would have no chance to make a comeback in the future. Yu Taotian nodded. The Lan clan had always been on good terms with them. Now that his daughter had married into the Lan clan had no choice but to help. At the very least, they could only rely on the Lan family's help before they could take a breather. Since that's the case, it's decided then. Lead the disciples to the Lan clan. Yu Taotian made his decision. Right now, the most important thing for them was to prevent this loss from spreading. They had to find a place to settle down first. Yu Manlan looked at everyone in a daze. It was as if everyone had made a decision in this short moment. She even suspected that everyone had already made up their minds before she even said anything. This was not something she wanted to see. Father, I'm afraid it's not appropriate for us to suddenly go to the Lan family like this, right? Yu Manlan panicked. If things really came to this, how would the Lan family view her? This was something she simply couldn't bear. Chapter 2605. Yu Siqing's words were tantamount to putting a hat on Yu Manlin's head. She couldn't even refute. If she disagreed, wouldn't it be tantamount to being ungrateful? Yu Manlan quietly observed the expressions of Yu Taotian and the others. It was obvious that once she rejected, they would respond harshly. Perhaps at this time even if she rejected it would be useless. Thinking of this, Yu Manlan couldn't help but feel annoyed. She didn't understand why all these things happened together. If Lan Qingyan hadn't been poisoned at this time, she wouldn't have come to the Yu clan and naturally wouldn't be involved in this matter. Even if the Yu clan went directly to the Lan clan, it was under the circumstances that she didn't know. She couldn't be completely blamed. Now that she was with the Lan clan, if she went back, the Lan clan would think that it was her idea. Wouldn't that be terrible? It would be good if Lan Jingquang didn't leave. After all, this kind of thing was decided by Lan Jingquang. Then she didn't need to care. Unfortunately, Lan Jingquang had left a few days ago, and all these things happened to her. She was speechless to the extreme. What kind of bad luck did she have this year? Why did all these things happen to her? Manlan, I will communicate with the Lan clan master about this matter. Pack up and prepare to leave. Yu Taotian directly asserted. He had made up his mind. He knew what Yu Manlan was thinking. He also knew Yu Manlan's position in the Lan clan all these years. But now it was a matter of life and death for the Yu clan. Yu Manlan should do her part for the clan. The clan had helped Yu Manlan for so many years. Now it was time for Yu Manlan to contribute. If the Yu clan didn't seize this opportunity, it was very likely that they would be wiped out in the future. After all, there were many forces that coveted the Yu clan. If they came to loot a burning house now, it would be one disaster after another. Yu Siqing and the elders didn't care about Yu Manlin's thoughts. In fact, Yu Manlin's thoughts were not important at all. They had already made up their minds. Seeing everyone's actions, Yu Manlan also knew that it was useless no matter what she said now. She could only try her best to minimize the impact. Father, since we are moving to the Lan clan, I think it's better to bring the Yu clan's disciples over. As for the other outsiders, it's better not to go. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if there are still people hiding among the outsiders. Yu Manlan probed. If she brought the others along, the number of people would be too much. Moreover, no one could guarantee that there were no spies among these outsiders. If it could be guaranteed, then Xianyi wouldn't have appeared, and today's disaster wouldn't have happened. Hearing Yu Manlin's words, Yu Taotian pondered for a moment and then nodded. You're right. Let's do that. It was already very embarrassing for them to bring the uninfected children of the family to disturb the Lan family. If they brought many outsiders, it would be very unpleasant if word got out. Yu Siqing and the others did not object. Right now, the most important thing was their residence. As for the people they had recruited, they were naturally not in the scope of their responsibility. Chapter 2606. In the process of packing, Jilishua unintentionally saw a note left behind by Xianyi. The content was very simple. If the Yu clan abandoned them and they had nowhere else to go, they could go to a certain place to look for her. When she saw this note, Jilishua couldn't help but be stunned. She never thought that Xianyi would leave her such a note. Didn't this mean that Xianyi had exposed his location? For a moment, Jilishua thought about whether she should give this note to Yu Siqing, but she kept it in the end. She didn't know what kind of hatred Xianyi had with the Yu clan, but according to her understanding of Xianyi, he wasn't someone who couldn't differentiate right from wrong. She thought back to when she provoked Xianyi. Xianyi didn't take her life. On the contrary, he even helped her greatly. She felt that Xianyi must have treated the Yu clan this way because the Yu clan had hurt him deeply. This could be seen from the word revenge. There was no cause and effect. In the end, no one could tell who was right and who was wrong. As an outsider, she naturally couldn't make any assertions. However, Xianyi left this note for her, which meant that he trusted her very much. Just based on this point, she couldn't let down Xianyi's trust in her. After all, she didn't have any value in deceiving Xianyi. Xianyi probably just wanted to give her a choice. After thinking about it, Jilishua still didn't waver. Although the Yu clan had fallen into such a state, she was still Yu Siqing's direct disciple. This was also her goal for so long. She couldn't give up so easily. However, when Jilishua finished packing and stood with the group of doctors and poison masters, waiting for Yu Siqing to return to lead them, she realized that Yu Siqing hadn't returned. I just saw the clan leader and Master Yu Siqing leave Yutian City together. It seems like they didn't plan to bring us along. At this moment, a doctor ran back quickly. She couldn't hide the panic on her face as she recounted what she saw. Jilishua and the others were stunned. They felt that they had already become a part of the Yu clan after joining them. They didn't expect the Yu clan to abandon them at this time. Is what you said true? They left just like that? Could it be that he forgot about us? Don't be naive. If they really have us in their heart, how could they forget about such a large group of us? Moreover, Jilishua was the Grandmaster's personal disciple. The Grandmaster would never forget her. Since the Master hasn't returned, he must have left us behind. Everyone's heart gradually sank. Right now, the entire Yu clan was a source of infection. They only hoped that they could leave together. Now that they had been abandoned, where should they go? I just heard the news that the Yu clan is preparing to rush towards the Long clan. However, they are only bringing the Yu clan's disciples with them. We outsiders will not have the chance to follow them. In my opinion, we should leave quickly. If we continue to stay here, I'm afraid it won't be long before we get infected. But I came all the way here just to learn from a master. Now where do you want me to go? Chapter 2607. All of a sudden, all the doctors and poison masters had ugly expressions on their faces. They had come all the way to the Yu clan to fight for a future. They had thought that they would have a meteoric rise in the future after coming to the Yu clan. They hadn't expected to be abandoned by the Yu clan. Instead, they didn't know where to go. Doctors weren't very strong to begin with. They only relied on their medical skills to travel the world. If they encountered any danger on the way back, they would really lose their lives. In comparison, a poison master's ability to protect himself was much stronger than a poison master. However, his bright future was gone just like that. The drop in his heart was not small. He had to find another way out. After Jilishua knew all this, she couldn't help but frown. She had never thought of this outcome. Not to mention the others, as Yu Siqing's direct disciple, Yu Siqing shouldn't have abandoned her like this. This feeling. It was as if her persistence for so many years had become a joke. From the beginning to the end, Yu Siqing had never treated her as one of her own. At this moment, Jilishua couldn't help but think of the note Xianyi had left her. Her heart couldn't help but thump. Could it be that all of this was within Xianyi's expectations? Jilishua took out the note again. After carefully reading the contents of the note, she was sure that all of this was within Xianyi's expectations. It turned out that Xianyi had seen through all of this long ago. She also knew that Yu Siqing wouldn't take her away at this time. Just like how Xianyi, as an outsider, had already seen that Di Tianzong wasn't sincere to her. But she was still entangled in this relationship. With this comparison, she realized that the gap between her and Xianyi was so big. However, since Xianyi had already anticipated everything, he should have already thought about the follow-up matters. Jilishua's eyes kept changing. Thousands of thoughts ran through her mind. An idea that had never crossed her mind before began to move at this moment. In that case, she might as well see what kind of place Xianyi was talking about. They still had so many doctors and poison masters here who didn't know where to go. If they could really find a good place to go, it would be great. She felt that Xianyi's master might be there. Xianyi's master's medical and poison skills were clearly stronger than Yu Siqing's. If they went there, they might have a better development. As for her worship of Yu Siqing, it was completely cut off from today onwards. Thinking of this, Jilishua couldn't help but look at the people behind her. I know a place where we can go. Are you willing to trust me? The group of doctors and poison masters looked at Jilishua in surprise. They hadn't expected her to make such a suggestion. Everyone looked at each other. Jilishua was Yu Siqing's personal disciple, so they usually listened to her arrangements. Now that Jilishua had made such a suggestion and they didn't know where to go, it wouldn't be a bad thing to follow them. After some consideration, everyone decided to follow Jilishua to take a look. Chapter 2608. In fact, Jilishua was also a little nervous. She didn't know what kind of place Xianyi was talking about. Although they had been abandoned by the Yu clan, as doctors and poison masters who could enter the Yu clan, it was not a big problem for them to find a decent force to stay in. However, it was impossible for them to enter an aristocratic family or a sect. If Xianyi told them to go to an ordinary place, it would be meaningless. However, Jilishua still chose to believe in Xianyi. She did not know why, but when she thought of Xianyi, she felt an inexplicable sense of trust. Because from the moment they met, Xianyi always had a confident look on her face, as if everything was within her expectations. Moreover, to be able to use her own strength to cause the Yu clan to fall into such a state, this was enough to prove Xianyi's power. Just as the Yu clan members were moving quickly, Jilishua and the others also set off towards the place Xianyi had told them to go. The originally bustling Yutian city had become a deserted city in just a few days, no longer as prosperous as before. Along the way, Yu Siqing was thinking about how to cure the poison in the Yu clan members. However, the final result made Yu Siqing break down a little, because she realized that the other party's method of making poison was really superb. Compared to the poison used in the first confrontation, Yu Siqing felt that at least there was a trace to follow. Although it would take a lot of time, she still knew where to start. The poison this time was obviously more powerful, and the other party did not intend to give her any chance to cure the poison. She pondered for a long time but could not find a way to start. This feeling made Yu Siqing very sullen, and she did not understand when there was a poison master in the Shangxian continent. If such an expert appeared, he should have been famous long ago, but she did not receive any news at all. She boasted that she understood poison, and had never met a poison that she could not cure in so many years. However, she had met one now, and the other party had come specifically for the Yu clan. Could it be that she did not help in the past, so the other party desperately learned poison to take revenge? Even Yu Siqing felt that this possibility was unbelievable. Clanmaster, we are going to the Long clan together this time. Will the person seeking revenge continue to come after knowing about our situation? The great elder of the Yu clan couldn't hide the worry on his face. Previously, the other party had already dealt them a heavy blow, but the other party wasn't satisfied, so they came again this time. The Yu clan had turned into stray dogs. However, they still managed to preserve some of their strength and were not completely annihilated. With the other party's unrelenting character, he was truly worried that if it happened again, all of them would die tragically. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the carriage immediately became much more solemn. Everyone's faces darkened, and their expressions were extremely unsightly. This was something they didn't want to think about. One must know that with their Yu clan's current strength, not to mention a cultivation aristocratic family, they couldn't even be compared to a small clan. This was the most frightening thing. In the future, let's not trust any outsiders anymore. This risk should be reduced by a lot. Yu clan's second elder said slowly. Chapter 2609. Yu Siqing remained silent and did not speak. Her thoughts were very complicated. The other party did not write on any of the rooms, but on her room, they wrote the word revenge. She had a vague feeling that the other party was coming for her. As for the entire Yu clan, they might have been implicated by her. Of course, she would not say this out loud. If she did not feel that the other party's target was very likely her, she would have chosen to leave by now. After all, with her reputation, no matter where she went, she would definitely be welcomed. Why should she follow the Yu clan and embarrass herself? It was a pity that she could only follow the others for the time being before she figured out all the details. Now she had thought of all the possible enemies, but she just couldn't figure out who did it. This made her extremely depressed. Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan sat in the other carriage. Seeing Lan Qingyan's pale face after being jolted, Yu Manlan also did not feel good. She only had one daughter, Lan Qingyan. If something happened to Lan Qingyan, she would not be able to bear it. Yu Xiqing had obviously put more effort into researching the poison in her children. Although she was very dissatisfied, Yu Xiqing had never listened to her, so she could not do anything. As they got closer to the Lan clan, Yu Xiqing's heart became more and more anxious. She really did not know how to answer when the Lan clan members asked about this matter. Thinking of Lan Jingquang's possible gaze, she felt her heart tremble. All these years, Lan Jingquang's tolerance for her had become lower and lower. If he directly divorced her because of this matter, then she would really be finished. Moreover, because Lan Qingyan had become like this, the Lan clan was also in troubled times. Needless to say, Lan Jingquang was now trying his best to pacify the clan's problems. If she brought so many people from the Yu clan along, it would undoubtedly leave something to be used against her. If it was in the past, the Yu clan would naturally have the effect of holding the fort. But now they were fleeing for their lives. She really did not know what to say. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen hurried back to Limitless Palace. Perhaps it was because their mood was extremely relaxed, even their footsteps were much faster. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen appeared in Limitless Palace, the disciples of Limitless Palace welcomed them. Today, Bailey Hongzhuang's reputation was no longer the same as it was in the past. All the disciples were convinced by her, but they were very curious about what the young palace master and Di Beichen did this time. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was full of smiles as she went to the palace lord's bedroom. Since she had already returned, she naturally had to report the situation to her master. She couldn't always let her master and master's wife find her every time. Moreover, the day of her trip to the Lan family was approaching. She also wanted to know what her parents were planning. She believed that after her parents saw the letter she sent when she left, they would definitely reply immediately. Yu Linfeng's news was naturally very fast. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Yu Xiqing arrived at the palace lord's bedroom, Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu were already waiting for them. Hongzhuang, looking at your smiling expression, it seems like you succeeded. Chapter 26:10. During this period of time, they had been waiting for news from Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. Last time, Bailey Hongzhuang and Yu Yang had gone to rescue their parents and cause great losses to the Yu clan. However, they had returned in a short period of time. However, this time, Bailey Hongzhuang and Yu Yang had gone out for a long time without any news. This caused Nangong Wu to be a little worried. Yu Linfeng was obviously full of confidence in Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. From the beginning to the end, he didn't feel at ease at all. He only told Nangong Wu to be at ease and wait for their return. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly and nodded, yes. As soon as she said this, the smiles on Nangong Wu and Yu Linfeng's faces widened a little. This result was what they had all been waiting for. That's really great. Nangong Wu clapped her hands. Her beautiful and enchanting face was filled with joy. Quickly tell me, how did you guys do it? She had originally wanted to send someone to follow them to find out the news. However, she was worried that if they were found out, it would affect Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's plan. I participated in the Yu clan's recruitment assembly. Bailey Hongzhuang sat down beside Nangong Wu. She understood her master's wife's gossipy mentality very well. Without needing Nangong Wu to ask, she told Nangong Wu everything that had happened during this period of time. After knowing that Bailey Hongzhuang had obtained first place in the recruitment assembly and had passed with full marks, Nangong Wu and Yu Linfeng's faces couldn't help but be filled with astonishment. They had always been confident in Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills, but there had never been such an amazing result in the recruitment event. This Yu Siqing is indeed a sinister person. I think she only accepted you as her direct disciples because she wanted to find people to help her. She didn't teach you anything for a month. Nangong Wu was speechless. Ever since she found out about Yu Siqing's actions over the years, she despised Yu Siqing to the extreme. This woman had always prioritized her own interests, even if the other party was her family. She really couldn't understand how a person could be so cold-blooded and heartless. Nothing was more important than her own interests. Just like how Yu Siqing wouldn't guide her disciples sincerely, she would only make use of them. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's extremely black eyes burst into a dazzling light. Her luck was really very good. Master and Master's wife had always been sincere to her, and had never hidden anything from her. This calmness and selflessness surprised her. This sincerity made her feel that she was unable to repay them. Compared to Yu Siqing's sinister selfishness, everything that Master and Master's wife had done was incomparably precious. Yu Siqing naturally can't be compared to Master and Master's wife. How could other people be as lucky as me? Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu's expressions softened. In fact, they were also very lucky. Otherwise, where would they find a successor like Bailey Hongzhuang? For a moment, the entire chamber was filled with laughter. That's right, Master and Master's wife. This time I made a decision on my own, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. What decision? Yu Linfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang indifferently, as if no matter what decision Bailey Hongzhuang made, he wouldn't be worried. Chapter 26:11. Bailey Hongzhuang's clear eyes flashed with a sharp and far-sighted radiance. Her light and sweet voice was also filled with certainty. In that kind of situation, it would be inconvenient for the Yu clan to bring a lot of outsiders. They would definitely leave the doctors and poison masters behind. I feel that these doctors and poison masters are quite strong. If we nurture them well, it would be beneficial for our limitless palace to rise in status. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu's faces were filled with astonishment. They had never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would make such a decision. Seeing that Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu were silent and did not say anything, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyebrows furrowed. Her eyes darkened as she thought to herself, could it be that Master and Mistress felt that her idea was not good? She had discussed it with Di Beichen and felt that this idea was very feasible. Only then did she decide to do it. If Master and Mistress were not willing, then she would transfer them to another place? Master and Mistress, if you feel that this matter is very troublesome. Bailey Hongzhuang opened her mouth at a loss. Without waiting for her to finish her words, Nangong Wu suddenly pulled her hand and looked at her with sparkling eyes. Hongzhuang, you are really too smart. You can even think of this kind of idea. If Yu Siqing knew that not only did you cause the Yu clan to fall into such a situation, you even recruited their doctors and poison masters, she would probably be angered to death. Whenever I think of this matter, I feel delighted. When that time comes, I must personally see Yu Siqing's expression. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Nangong Wu, who said a lot of things like pouring beans. She could not help but stare blankly. So, it was not that Mistress did not agree, but that she was immersed in her idea? Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's stunned expression, Di Beichen's face was filled with smiles. Nangong Wu's character had always been one to be startled, and this kind of reaction was not unexpected. Yu Linfeng's lips curled into a refined smile. Following that, he gave Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up. Hongzhuang, if it really succeeds, then you would really have done a great service. As the palace master of Limitless Palace, Yu Linfeng naturally knew the role of the doctors. In the past, which power did not envy the Yu clan's doctors and poison masters? These were resources that every major force couldn't lack. However, the Yu clan's status in the eyes was too stable. Almost every one of them would go to the Yu clan, as if they were the only place where carps would leap over the dragon's gate. The doctors and poison masters that the various big powers usually recruited could not be compared to the Yu clan's talents. Therefore, everyone could only continue like this. Every time they wanted to recruit a few doctors and poison masters from the Yu clan, the various powers would have to pay a huge price. Furthermore, they also had to curry favor with the Yu clan. It was really a bit sullen. Now that the Yu clan had fallen into such a situation, many powers would definitely be happy to see it. After all, everyone knew about Yu Siqing's sarcasm and pickiness in the past. They had no choice but to accept it. However, when the various powers were happy that the Yu clan had fallen into such a situation, they would definitely be very worried. If they wanted to recruit doctors and poison masters in the future, they would not have a good choice. Chapter 26:12. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Her beautiful and exquisite face revealed a bit of satisfaction and confidence. Although I'm not sure yet, I feel that I'm quite confident. During her time in the Yu clan, Bailey Hongzhuang had a certain understanding of Yu Siqing's and Ji Lushua's personalities. Unless Yu Siqing chose to leave with Ji Lushua, Ji Lushua would definitely choose to bring doctors and poison masters to investigate after seeing the note she left behind. Although doctors and poison masters were scarce resources to many forces, it was not easy for ordinary doctors to find a way to enter the forces. Therefore, as long as Yu Siqing suggested it, everyone would definitely come with the intention of investigating. Limitless Palace. Once they knew that the place they came to was Limitless Palace, she believed that no one would refuse. This was her confidence in Limitless Palace. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was so confident, the smile on Yu Linfeng and the others' faces deepened. Bailey Hongzhuang had never been an exaggerating person. Since she said she was sure, then she must be 80% or 90% sure. Master, once those doctors and poison masters come, they will know that the place we stayed at is Limitless Palace, and they will also know my identity. Saying that, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at Yu Linfeng. This was unavoidable. Yu Linfeng naturally knew what Bailey Hongzhuang meant, and immediately said, "No problem. You originally planned to lay your cards on the table. With Master as your backing, it doesn't matter if everything is exposed." Yu Linfeng seemed to be very free and easy, even if others knew that the Yu clan was defeated by Limitless Palace's young palace master. So what? In this world, the winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. No one would care about this process. Moreover, the reason why the Yu clan had fallen into such a situation was because of their own actions. Once Bailey Hongzhuang's identity was exposed, everyone would know everything. Perhaps the entire Shangxian continent's forces would tremble. After getting Yu Linfeng's understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Ever since Limitless Palace had risen to the top, they had always been very positive. If people knew that the Yu clan had been defeated by Limitless Palace, they would definitely be criticized. In reality, this was completely a personal grudge between her and the Yu clan. However, other people would not think this way. After all, she was the young palace master of Limitless Palace. "Hongzhuang, you don't have to worry about this at all. We will always be on your side. Those despicable fellows have been arrogant for so many years. It's time for them to receive their retribution." Nangong Wu was beaming with joy. What was there to care about when dealing with this kind of guy who angered both men and gods? I'm afraid that the Yu clan's losses would be disastrous, and they would no longer be able to regain their former glory. Once this news spreads out, many powers who have enmity with the Yu clan would not let them off easily. It's impossible for the Yu clan to regain their former glory. Di Baichen said slowly. As long as they were still around, the Yu clan would never be able to make a comeback. Once Limitless Palace, Tiangang Sect and Sun Moon Palace joined hands and declared that they were enemies with the Yu clan, the other powers would definitely not dare to approach the Yu clan. Under this kind of situation, the Yu clan could only struggle at death's door until they gradually disappeared. Chapter 26:13. Now that the Yu clan had suffered heavy losses, it was the best time to beat them while they were down. Once this news spread out, the Yu clan's enemies would definitely not miss this opportunity. They would definitely deal with the Yu clan immediately. After all, the earlier they acted, the more benefits they would get. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The Yu clan had been strong for so many years, they had quite a number of treasures. It's too late to spread the news now. Yu Linfeng laughed softly. His eyes that were as black as jade were filled with affection and gentleness. Nangong Wu had always had a temperament that was easily agitated. She hated evil as if it was her personal enemy, and wished for the world to be in chaos. Back when they were together, Nangong Wu had always caused all sorts of trouble. Every time he would helplessly help Nangong Wu clean up her mess. However, it was also because of Nangong Wu's personality and true nature that he liked her. Helping her clean up her mess was also something that Yu Linfeng was used to doing. Too late. Nangong Wu frowned doubtfully. She did not understand the meaning of Yu Linfeng's words at that moment. If our judgment is not wrong, the Yu clan should have moved to the Lan clan immediately. After such a long time, I'm afraid that they have already reached the Lan clan. Di Beichen, who had been silent all this while, slowly opened his mouth. His handsome face held a slight smile. This was the best plan that he could think of from the Yu clan standpoint. Since he could think of it, there were many smart people in the Yu clan. Naturally, they could also think of this point. I see. Nangong Wu suddenly understood. With so many people from the Yu clan moving to the Lan clan, it would be a big trouble for the Lan clan. I'm afraid that the Lan clan would not be willing to accept it. Even if the Yu clan had suffered a heavy blow and lost a lot of people, there would still be a lot of people left. With such a large group of people going to the Lan clan to seek protection, they would not be able to leave the Lan clan for a long time. Facing such a big trouble suddenly, no one would be willing to do so. Even if the Lan clan is not willing, they can only suffer in silence because of their relationship with the Yu clan. If they reject the Lan family's request, once the news spreads, it will have a great impact on the Lan family's reputation. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes flashed with a bit of light. Her face was calm and indifferent. This scene was also what she wanted to see. When she went to the Lan clan to reveal her identity, the Lan clan and the Yu clan would know about it immediately. Back then, these two clans had joined forces to force them into such a situation. Now, she was going to let these two clans experience the consequences of their actions. Nangong Wu nodded. She didn't miss the fierce look in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes. It seemed that Bailey Hongzhuang had already planned all of this. By the way, Hongzhuang, there's something I have to tell you. Nangong Wu seemed to have suddenly thought of something. She straightened her face and looked serious. During the time you were away, we noticed that there were people from the Lan family who came to inquire about you, but we didn't leak any information, so they probably didn't get anything. There's also a letter from the Shirtian pavilion. Take a look. Nangong Wu took out a letter from her Qiankuan bag and handed it to Bailey Hongzhuang. Has your identity been known by the Lan clan? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. It's okay. This is also within my expectations. Chapter 26:14. Bailey Hongzhuang opened the envelope. The content of the letter was very simple. The Lan family had sent someone to the Shirtian pavilion to investigate Bailey Hongzhuang's identity and wanted to know about Bailey Hongzhuang's experience over the years. However, Mo Yunjue directly refused. Mo Yunjue and Bailey Hongzhuang had a good relationship. Since the Battle of Zhualu, many forces had already known about this year. Lan Borong had no choice but to ask the Shirtian pavilion because Limitless Palace kept a tight lid on information. Most importantly, from the information they received, Bailey Hongzhuang seemed to have appeared out of thin air and inexplicably became the young palace master of Limitless Palace. Before this, Yu Linfeng, the palace master of Limitless Palace, had never mentioned anything about the young palace master. Even the disciples of Limitless Palace only saw the young palace master's true appearance on the day of the Battle of Zhualu. Therefore, they couldn't get any information from Limitless Palace. On the contrary, they got more information from Tianggang sect. However, They didn't know anything about Bailey Hongzhuang before she participated in the assessment. Although they didn't know much, Lan Borong felt that the possibility of Bailey Hongzhuang being the child they had been looking for was increasing. This might be an intuition, but this intuition was shockingly sharp. Di Beichen looked at the contents of the letter. The situation was indeed not beyond their expectations. They weren't worried about this. In fact, even if the Lan family knew Bailey Hongzhuang's true identity now, the Lan family couldn't do anything about it. Master, is there any news from the Sun Moon Palace? Bailey Hongzhuang didn't say anything after reading the content. Instead, she looked at Yu Linfeng. Her parents' thoughts would determine what she would do when she went to the Lan family's frozen divine pond. Would she reveal her identity directly, or find another opportunity? Everything depended on how her parents' recovery was. This time, they must make a grand appearance in front of the Lan family. They must let those relatives who had shown them cold faces see it with their own eyes. From there, they would know what a wrong choice they had made back then. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's question, Yu Linfeng and Nangongwu smiled. You will know about this when you return to your palace. Yu Linfeng didn't answer him directly, but kept him in suspense. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. Her clear eyes revealed a trace of doubt, but she did not continue to ask. Master's wife, when I left the Yu clan this time, I brought along the Yu clan's martial arts hall's cultivation techniques, martial arts and medical books. If it's suitable, you can use it to enrich the martial arts hall. As for these medical books, you can also keep them. If the Yu clan's doctors and poison masters are really recruited by me, then they will also be a kind of resource. After saying this, Bailey Hongzhuang directly placed the universe bag on the table. Nangongwu couldn't help but stare blankly. Then she exploded. Hongzhuang, I didn't hear wrongly, right? You brought the Yu clan's martial arts hall here? Yu Linfeng, who was always elegant and casual, couldn't help but stiffen. His expression was filled with disbelief. The Yu clan actually didn't even realize that the martial arts hall was stolen? The martial arts hall was the foundation of every power. Chapter 26:15. Nangongwu and Yu Linfeng did not doubt Bailey Hongzhuang's words when they saw the astonishing amount of martial skills in the Qingkuan bag. No matter how Bailey Hongzhuang did it, she had indeed done it. It's not hard to imagine how much the Yu clan hates you. Nangongwu could not help but shake her head. She felt that the Yu clan was extremely unlucky to have offended Bailey Hongzhuang. The Yu clan had stood tall in the Shangxian continent for so many years. Not only did they have to move away en masse, even the foundation that they had accumulated for so many years was shaken. It was really shocking. If Yu Taotian knew that all of this was because of Yu Xiqing's selfishness, who knew if he would still value his sister so much? Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but chuckle. She could also imagine how furious Yu Taotian and the others would be when they knew about this. However, the angrier they were, the happier she would be. Mistress, I will return to my bedroom first, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. She also wanted to know what her parents were planning to do. She would be able to carry out the next step of her plan after she returned to her bedroom. At this moment, Yu Linfeng said, Hongzhuang, these martial skills are not cheap. You should keep them for yourself. Martial skills were the most important resources for cultivators. Usually, a high-level martial skill could be auctioned for a sky-high price. Furthermore, these were the treasures of the Yu clan for so many years. Master, I am the young palace master of Limitless Palace. These things naturally belong to Limitless Palace. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled lightly. She understood her master's thoughts. However, she had already treated Limitless Palace as her own home. Ever since she became her master's disciple, her master had always helped her generously. These martial skills were extremely valuable in other people's eyes. However, in her eyes, they could not be compared to her master's kindness. Limitless Palace had not been established for as long as other large sections. Naturally, their martial skills were slightly lacking. Other powers had to accumulate for so many years to reach this step. However, her master had relied on his own strength to reach this step. Although he was accumulating them bit by bit, it was a very long process. Now that they had the Yu clan's martial skills, Limitless Palace's foundation could increase a little. It would also be very helpful for their disciples to increase their strength. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Yu Linfeng was silent for a moment before he nodded, the smile in his eyes becoming gentler. They were Yu clan. Now. Yu clan. It was Hongzhuang's fortune to have a master like Yu Linfeng. Just like how he had been raised by his master since he was young. If it wasn't for Sitiyan who happened to pass by at that time, he would have long become a wisp of a ghost in this world. How could he have such a life now? Speaking of which, they were once unfortunate. But now they were also fortunate. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun returned to the palace together. They had been on the road for so many days, and they also wanted to freshen up. After all, this travel-worn appearance was really not very comfortable. Chapter 26:16. In the past, when they came back, there was no one else in the bedroom. They didn't know who was inside today. However, the two of them didn't mind. Usually, Nangongwu would send people to help clean the bedroom. Who knows, maybe they would bump into them today. After all, Nangongwu didn't know when they would come back. As they slowly walked back to the bedroom, the three beasts had already slipped in. Immediately after, Bailey Hongzhuang heard the three beasts' cries of surprise. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun quickly rushed to the three beasts' location. Immediately after, two figures appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's line of sight. The worry on Bailey Hongzhuang's face quickly dissipated and was replaced with joy. "Father, Mother, when did you come to Limitless Palace? I didn't even know." A dazzling smile appeared on her exquisite face. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was light and happy. "After we received your letter, we decided to come over." Lan Yunxiao smiled and said. He didn't expect that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun had already done so many things in such a short period of time. When they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang was actually going to find the Yu clan to take revenge, they couldn't help but be shocked. They immediately rushed to Limitless Palace. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had already set off. They originally planned to go to Yutian City to take a look. However, under Yu Linfeng's persuasion, they chose to stay in Limitless Palace and wait for Bailey Hongzhuang to come back. Yu Linfeng obviously had a lot of confidence in Bailey Hongzhuang. His words were filled with reassurance that they didn't need to worry about this matter. As Hongzhuang's parents, they didn't spend much time with Hongzhuang. They didn't really understand Hongzhuang's abilities. In their eyes, Yu Xiqing was an extremely vicious and merciless person. Once Bailey Hongzhuang was found out by Yu Xiqing, they would be in dire straits. They had been living like this all these years. At this moment, seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun return safely, they could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there were no problems. Otherwise, even if they had to risk their lives against Yu Xiqing, they would definitely tear her to pieces. "Yixuan, isn't it a little too risky for the two of you to go to Yutian City?" Fortunately, nothing happened. Otherwise, Mother would be worried to death. Mu Lingbing tugged at Bailey Hongzhuang's hand, her tone reproachful, but her eyes were filled with concern. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "Mother, look, aren't we back in one piece? It's precisely because we're confident that we'll be able to do it. It's also because the two of us are small targets that won't be easily discovered." Mu Lingbing rolled her eyes at Bailey Hongzhuang, but she heaved a sigh of relief. In her eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang's safety was the most important. "What did the two of you do in Yutian City this time?" "Did you encounter any danger?" Lan Yunxiao walked to Di Beichun's side. The usually refined and quiet him couldn't help but ask. After all, this matter concerned his precious daughter. Di Beichun saw that his future father-in-law had asked him, and naturally did not dare to neglect. He immediately told him what they had done and the results. He had promised his future father-in-law that he would properly protect Hong Zhuang. He couldn't allow his future father-in-law to be dissatisfied with him because of this. Chapter 26:17. The Yu clan had collapsed just like that. Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing found it hard to believe. A power that had existed for so many years in the Shangxian continent was destroyed by Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun single-handedly. This level of destruction was too shocking. All along, the destructive power of poison masters had never been weak. However, there had never been a poison master whose destructive power had reached such a level. Moreover, the other party was from the Yu clan, famous for their medical and poison skills. Although their hearts were filled with emotion, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun wouldn't lie to them. They could only say that the two's strength was abnormal. According to what you said, the Yu clan has moved to the Lan clan? Mu Lingbing frowned. If the Yu clan and Lan clan became one, wouldn't that increase Lan Jingquang's power? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. This is only my guess. I can't confirm it yet, but we've already sent people to investigate. Yishuan's guess is very likely. Coincidentally, Lan Qingyan is recuperating at the Yu clan. Now that the Yu clan is in trouble, moving to the Lan clan is the best choice, Lan Yunxiao said in a low voice. Father, Mother, I'll be going to the Lan clan's Divine Ice Lake in a few days. Have you made your decision? Bailey Hongzhuang's clear eyes stared at Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's outstanding appearances. She had always wanted to know what her parents were planning. We've already recovered a lot of our strength, but there's still a gap between us and Lan Jingquang. Mu Lingbing's brows furrowed slightly, a trace of worry appearing on her face. If possible, she also hoped that the three of them could go to the Lan clan together. But back then they had never lost to Lan Jingquang and Yu Manlan. This time they naturally didn't want to be weaker than them. However, there was still a gap in strength. If they went like this, their aura would be suppressed. This wasn't something they wanted to see. Give us another 1 or 2 months. That should be enough, Lan Yunxiao said slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. 2 months is still not too late. It takes a month to cultivate in the icy divine pond. Plus the interval, it's almost 2 months. When she heard Mu Lingbing's words, she thought that the gap was huge. If it was only 2 months, then there was still time. This is all thanks to Linfeng's help. If it wasn't for his help, I'm afraid we would have to wait a few years before we can go to the Lan clan. Lan Yunxiao's voice was warm and mellow, and there was a hint of emotion in his voice. He never thought that his daughter's master would be Yu Linfeng. Speaking of which, life's encounters were truly miraculous. Perhaps everything was predestined. Back then, he had helped Yu Linfeng out of goodwill. Now Yu Linfeng was also doing his best to help his daughter. It was a great karma. As Lan Yunxiao's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun thought for a moment and understood the meaning behind his words. They never thought that Yu Linfeng would let Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing know about the existence of the stairway to heaven. It seemed that Yu Linfeng didn't just trust them a little. Even though Yu Linfeng was also a member of the Lan clan and was related to Lan Yunxiao by blood, he definitely wouldn't reveal anything unless it was someone he trusted. Chapter 26:18. She had always been curious about her master's identity. However, since her master hated the Lan family so much, he must have had terrible memories back then. Thus, she didn't ask about it to avoid reminding her master of something he didn't want to recall. She was curious why her master had such a good impression of her father when he hated the Lan family so much. She only heard her master say that her father had helped him back then, so she was curious about the process. What kind of past could make her master hate the Lan family so much that he even took out the rainbow pearl? Lan Yunxiao saw the unconcealable curiosity in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes and nodded with a faint smile. Linfeng is also a disciple of the Lan family, but he's only a branch disciple. He doesn't want to talk about the past anymore, but I helped him when someone bullied him back then. I didn't expect Linfeng to remember this. In fact, I haven't seen him since he left the Lan family at a young age. By chance and coincidence he actually became your master, and there was a day when he and I would meet again. Bailey Hongzhuang saw that Lan Yunxiao didn't talk about the past in detail, so she didn't ask anymore. Perhaps what happened back then was too harmful to her master, so he never talked about it. It's all fate. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled sweetly. Now that she had so many people who cared about her, it was really a great blessing. Father, the rainbow pearl in my body was also given to me by Master. Do you know this? The depths of Lan Yunxiao's eyes flickered as a trace of heaviness flitted across his handsome and elegant face. The rainbow pearl. That was the greatest pain in his heart. He didn't find it inappropriate that he didn't obtain the 7-colored divine pearl. In fact, Yu Linfeng's strength and talent were very strong. In the past, his reputation in the Lan family was very high. Even if he didn't have the rainbow pearl, it wouldn't be a problem. When he found out that his precious daughter had the rainbow pearl in her body, he was also very happy. However, he didn't protect his daughter well, and allowed her rainbow pearl to be snatched away. Her life was ruined when she didn't know anything. I know. Lan Yunxiao's expression quickly returned to normal. He would personally make Lan Jing pay for everything that happened that year. For the grievances his daughter had suffered, he would never let go of anyone involved in the original plan. He had never thought that Yu Linfeng would hate the Lan family to such an extent that he would not even be willing to accept an inheritance like the Rainbow Divine Pearl. However, Bailey Hongzhuang regaining the Rainbow Divine Pearl was something that made him extremely happy. Yixuan, you have to be filial to your master in the future. Lan Yunxiao amiably patted Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. Yu Linfeng didn't want to recall the past, but he was willing to treat them as family. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. I understand. Master is so good to us. I will not forget this kindness. Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao looked at each other, feeling gratified in their hearts. Their daughter had not been with them for so many years, but she had grown up to be so outstanding. God was also kind to them. During this period of time, we will do our best to raise our cultivation. When the time comes, we will head to the Lan family. Chapter 26:19. Bailey Hongzhuang rested in the Wuji Palace for a few days. She and Di Beichen were also cultivating on the sky stairway. Since they were about to head to the Lan family, the stronger they were, the better. Even if they couldn't improve much in a short period of time, it was still good to stabilize their cultivation. Bailey Hongzhuang had broken through too quickly during the Battle of Zhualu, so her foundation wasn't stable enough. However, after a month of cultivation in the Yu family, her foundation was once again stabilized. Now that she had a good foundation, she would be able to improve greatly in the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow. Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't very clear about the value of the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow, but as a member of the Lan family, Lan Yunxiao was naturally very familiar with the family's treasures. From Lan Yunxiao's explanation, Bailey Hongzhuang understood that the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow contained a very special kind of energy. Not only could it increase a cultivator's strength, but it could also reduce the difficulty of breaking through to the Purple Realm. The Blue Realm and Purple Realm seemed to be the same realm, but breaking through to the Purple Realm was the most difficult of all. Many geniuses were stuck at the Blue Realm 9th level, unable to break through no matter how hard they tried. Only a few rare treasures in the world could be of help. Thus, the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow alone was enough to make all the major powers scramble for it. The Divine Pond of Ice and Snow was also one of the Lan family's foundations. Because of the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow, the Lan family's cultivators had a higher chance of breaking through to the Purple Realm than other families' cultivators. As long as there was one more Purple Realm expert, the family's strength would increase by a lot. This was also one of the reasons why the Lan family had been ranked among the top families for so many years. In many people's eyes, the Lan family was an extremely lucky family. Not only did they have the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow, they also had a mysterious inheritance like the Rainbow Pearl. These two treasures were enough to stabilize the Lan family's position. If one's cultivation hasn't reached the Blue Realm 9th level when entering the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow, will it still be useful? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Lan Yunxiao nodded with a faint smile. It's still effective, but the closer you are to the 9th level of the Blue Realm, the greater the effect. Even if there is some difference, this energy will remain in the cultivator's body. When the time comes to break through to the Purple Realm, this energy will be of some help. This divine pond of ice and snow is indeed magical. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. Nature was indeed full of wonders. Anything could be born. These kinds of wondrous items were often of great help to cultivators, but it was impossible to identify the source. It is indeed not easy to break through to the Purple Realm. This bottleneck is much more difficult than the bottlenecks of other realms. Di Beichen's handsome face was slightly cold. He had already felt this during this period of time. During the Battle of Zhuelu, he had already broken through to Blue Realm level 9. However, during this period of time, he only felt that the origin energy stored in his body was constantly increasing, but the bottleneck showed no signs of loosening. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation since he started cultivating. No matter how he tried to break through, the bottleneck remained as stable as Mount Tai, making him feel a sense of defeat. Beichen, you've been in Blue Realm level 9 for a while now, right? Chapter 26:20. Di Beichen nodded slightly, his dark eyes twinkling. He had long heard that breaking through to the Purple Realm wasn't easy, unless one had a certain amount of luck. Now, it seemed that this saying wasn't the least bit exaggerated. There are quite a few Blue Realm cultivators in the Shangxian continent, but the number of Purple Realm cultivators is much lower. This must be the reason. Di Beichen smiled. Although his strength hadn't improved for so long, this didn't affect Di Beichen's mood. Beichen, although your current cultivation won't loosen the bottleneck, the more energy you store in your body, the more stable your foundation will be. You'll have a higher chance of successfully breaking through in the divine pond of ice. Lan Yunxiao clearly understood this situation very well. What he was doing now seemed to be useless, but in reality it was still helpful to a certain extent. The Purple Realm was the most difficult bottleneck for cultivators to break through. Once one broke through, it would be a brand new realm. But if one couldn't break through, they would forever be stuck at the 9th level of the Blue Realm. The longer one remained stuck, the lower the chance of successfully breaking through in the future. Lan Yunxiao had seen many cultivators who had stopped at the 9th level of the Blue Realm. Because the large aristocratic families had abundant cultivation resources, as long as the cultivator's talent wasn't bad, they could still break through to the 9th level of the Blue Realm with the help of the family. But to break through to the Purple Realm, the cultivator had to rely on themselves. I understand. Di Beichen understood and engraved Lan Yunxiao's suggestion in his heart. Currently, he had no other choice but to continue cultivating like this. Many cultivators would choose to go out and train when they couldn't break through a bottleneck, or find a chance to break through at the edge of life and death. He had to go take a look at the divine pond of ice first. If it could help him break through, that would be the best. If it couldn't, then he would have to find another way. Lan Yunxiao was also a genius in cultivation. Back then, he had broken through to the Purple Realm with the help of the divine pond of ice and snow, which was why he was so familiar with the use of the divine pond of ice and snow. Normally, there were countless forces that coveted the Lan family's divine ice pool. However, the Lan family was powerful enough to dispel their covetous thoughts. Bailey Hongzhuang naturally knew how difficult it was to break through to the Purple Realm. Now that an opportunity like the divine pond of ice had presented itself before her, she had to work hard to improve her cultivation during this period of time. Fortunately, 1 month of cultivation in the stairway to heaven was equivalent to 10 months of cultivation in the outside world. During this period of time, her strength should be able to improve by another step. She was now at Blue Realm level 7. Once she broke through to Blue Realm level 8, she would gain more benefits. However, Bailey Hongzhuang left Limitless Palace with Di Beichen after cultivating for 5 days. According to Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment, Ji Lishua and the others should have arrived at the place she had mentioned earlier. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't let Ji Lishua head directly to Limitless Palace. Instead, she brought her to a village not far from Limitless Palace. Although she was very confident in her judgment, She couldn't guarantee that something unexpected would happen. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen arrived, Jilishua and the others had already arrived. Jilishua, why did you bring us here? The group of doctors and poison masters couldn't help feeling puzzled when they saw that Di Beichen didn't bring them to any forces and instead brought them to a remote mountain forest. Chapter 26-21. Jilishua was also puzzled by the situation in front of her. She looked left and right and it didn't seem like a good place to go. However, Xianyi had no reason to lie to her, so she firmly believed it. Everyone calm down. Let's wait for a while. Jilishua couldn't give an answer to everyone's question, because even she didn't know where they were going. The only thing she could do now was to wait for Xianyi to come and pick them up. Otherwise, she wouldn't know how to solve this problem. Everyone looked at Jilishua doubtfully, but since Jilishua wasn't willing to say, they had no other choice. Since they were already here and had rushed for such a long time, everyone was exhausted. If they left without waiting for any results, wouldn't it be a wasted trip? Everyone sat down on the ground one after another. Complaints rose and fell one after another. They weren't complaining about Jilishua, but they were deeply moved by their encounters during this period of time. Doctors and poison masters weren't cultivators, so their physiques couldn't be compared to cultivators. After rushing for such a long time, everyone was exhausted. If it wasn't for the fact that they wanted to find a good place to go, they wouldn't have been able to resist the urge to rest halfway. They didn't expect to see such a deep forest after rushing with all their might. They couldn't help but feel depressed. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were observing Jilishua and the others from a distance. Bailey Hongzhuang was familiar with many of the doctors in front of them. Among them were many of the newly recruited doctors and poison masters that the Yu clan had left in the clan and hadn't sent out. These doctors and poison masters were talents that everyone would be happy to recruit. The Yu clan had no choice but to leave them behind. If it wasn't for the fact that their clan was destroyed and they had to seek help from the Long clan, the Yu clan wouldn't be willing to leave them behind. Of course, the most depressed people were this group of people. The number of people that Jilishua had brought was more than what Bailey Hongzhuang had expected. If they could recruit these people back to Limitless Palace, it would undoubtedly be a good thing. Although it would take some time to develop with Bailey Hongzhuang, who was even more skilled than Yu Xiqing in the art of medicine and poison, none of this would be a problem. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen did not go out immediately. They had to find out if there were any spies from the Yu clan. After all, these people had stayed in the Yu clan for a period of time. Even if the Yu clan's actions this time had hurt a lot of people's hearts, it didn't mean that there weren't people who were loyal to the Yu clan. If Limitless Palace were to recruit this kind of person, it would undoubtedly be troublesome. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen needed to pay more attention to him. And in this kind of waiting, when everyone was full of resentment, this kind of emotion was the easiest to erupt. Hence, Bailey Hongzhuang and Lin Yiqian sat quietly at the side and watched as everyone waited in boredom. Meanwhile, the voices of disdain grew louder and louder. Jilishua, why did you bring us here? There's obviously nothing here. In my opinion, we might as well wait near Yutian City. The Yu clan wouldn't just leave us behind like this. As long as the Yu clan recovers a bit, they might come and find us. After all, we have already stayed in the Yu clan for so long. Chapter 26-22. Most of them had a lot of resentment towards the Yu clan's actions this time. It was because they believed in the Yu clan that they would travel thousands of miles to become a member of the Yu clan. They didn't expect that the Yu clan would abandon them without even saying a word. If their reaction wasn't fast enough, they might have already been infected by the plague. Thinking back, they were still a little scared. The Yu clan's actions were too despicable. They did not care about their lives at all. One must know that they had previously treated the poisoned Yu clan disciples under Yu Xiqing's orders. They never thought that they would end up like this. Many of them had already made up their minds. Even if the Yu clan made a comeback in the future and summoned them back, they would not care at all. There was no point in going to such a heartless clan. There are still people who are loyal to the Yu clan. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. It seemed like it was necessary for them to stay here and watch the show. Otherwise, once they went to Limitless Palace, it would not be easy to find these people. Most of the newly recruited people have resentment in their hearts. However, those who have stayed in the Yu clan for a long time might still be loyal to the Yu clan. Di Beichen's eyes were filled with confidence. He glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang and said, "These people will jump out one by one very soon. They would cultivate while watching the show. At the same time, they would remember the names of the doctors and poison masters who were loyal to the Yu clan. When the time came, they would directly get rid of them." Ji Lixue also felt powerless when she saw the crowd arguing. The situation was already very bad. She never thought that the two sides would still disagree with each other. However, her thoughts were the same as most people. Originally, Yu Xiqing was her belief. However, it was because she had believed in her for so many years that one day, when she realized that it was not what she had imagined, her heart could not accept it. The depth of love, the depth of hatred. Now, not only was she unwilling to have anything to do with the Yu clan, she was even unwilling to mention the belief she had in the Yu clan. This was because it was too ironic. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. As time gradually passed, they did not see any changes. Everyone could not hold back anymore. "Ji Lixue, you didn't say anything after bringing us here. What exactly are we doing? We've been waiting here for a few days but nothing happened. You're not lying to us, are you? It's such a desolate place. It's obvious that there won't be any forces here. What kind of place is this?" The anger that had accumulated over the past 3 days exploded at this moment, and everyone pointed their spears at Ji Lixue. Most importantly, if Ji Lixue told them the reason, it would be easier for them to judge. Now that Ji Lixue didn't say anything and just let them stay here, everyone was confused. It was really not a good feeling. Ji Lixue furrowed her brows. She hadn't expected things to turn out this way. However, after thinking about it, she still felt that it was best not to tell them about Xianyi. After all, Xianyi had caused this disaster. Although it was revenge, it had indeed affected everyone. If he said it out loud, he was afraid that everyone would become even more agitated. Chapter 26-23. When Ji Lixue had a conflict with them with Di Beichen's character, he would have just killed such indifferent people. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had chosen to let them go. Later on, Bailey Hongzhuang had told him that other than the conflict, Ji Lixue was a very good person. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang had become Yu Xiqing's direct disciple, Di Beichen had never seen Ji Lixue again. Judging from Ji Lixue's current performance, she was indeed a good person. Until now, she had not pushed all the blame onto Xianyi, but had taken on the pressure herself. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. "After so many years of experience, I still have the ability to discern. If everyone believes me, then continue to wait. If not, then leave." Ji Lixue muttered to herself for a long while before saying, "Don't worry." Now she could not be sure of everything. No one knew what the outcome would be. Even if she explained, she could not find a reasonable answer. It was better to not say anything and let everyone make their own choice. After hearing Ji Lixue's words, the people who were originally angry felt as if their fists had punched cotton. With Ji Lixue's attitude, it was meaningless for them to make a fuss. "I'll leave first." Fu Adi's face was full of anger. With her medical skills, she would definitely be able to go to other large forces. Even if she did not have the opportunity now, it would not be a problem for her to go to an ordinary force. Why should she wait here foolishly? In her opinion, Ji Lixue was simply deliberately messing with them. As Fu Adi took the lead to stand up, a few people in Fu Adi's group also stood up and chose to leave together. Seeing this, Ji Lixue frowned but did not say anything. Fu Adi snorted and said, "Let's go." When the others saw Fu Adi leave, their hearts were also shaken. However, compared to following Fu Adi, it was better to follow Ji Lixue. At least, their thoughts were the same as Ji Lixue's. They could almost conclude that Fu Adi and the others still wanted to rely on the Yu clan. Not long after Fu Adi and the others left, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's figures slowly appeared in front of everyone. Everyone saw two peerless figures walking out of the green mountains, as if they were people from a painting. They could not help but wonder if this was real. The woman wore a long white dress that could not hide her extraordinary temperament. Her features were like a painting, exquisite and perfect, like the most exquisite masterpiece of the heavens, floating like a fairy. Beside the woman was a handsome man with a calm and distant expression. His handsome eyebrows carried a handsome smile, but it could not hide the sharp light in his eyes. The two walked side by side, as if they were an immortal couple. Everyone looked at the two people who suddenly appeared. They could not help but be stunned. To be. They were the people who had come to pick them. People, be. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but feel excited. Jilashua also sized up the two people in front of her. She did not know why, but she felt that the woman in front of her was somewhat familiar. However, she still erased this thought. The other party was so outstanding. If she had seen them before, she would not have forgotten them. However, were they arranged by Xianyi to pick them up? Chapter 26-24. Bailey Hongzhuang stood in front of Jilashua and the others. Originally, she was prepared to tell everyone her identity, but after hearing everyone's discussion these few days, she decided not to. Although the grudge between her and the Yu clan was deep, and it was normal for the Yu clan to fall into such a situation, she had indeed harmed the interests of others. At this time, if she were to say that she was Xianyi, everyone would probably find it hard to accept. Rather than that, she might as well tell them in the future. Once everyone found a better place to go, they would naturally not care about these problems. Welcome, doctors and poison masters. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly and said, now that the Yu clan has suffered a calamity, everyone must be looking for a place to go. What do you think of the Limitless Palace? Bailey Hongzhuang went straight to the point. At this time there was no use in saying anything else. It would be better for both sides to make things clear. Originally, everyone was still doubting if Bailey Hongzhuang was here to pick them up, but after hearing her words, their eyes lit up. Limitless Palace. That was an extremely powerful sect. They had never thought that Jilashua would bring them to such a good place, the Limitless Palace. Once they became a member of the sect, wouldn't it be like a carp leaping through the Dragon's Gate? Even if the Limitless Palace's foundation was shallow, their strength could not be underestimated. This was a great opportunity. Everyone looked at Jilashua with joy. They never thought that Jilashua would bring them to such a good place. Previously, they had treated Jilashua in such a manner. It was truly inexcusable. Jilashua, we said those words because we didn't know. Don't take it to heart. Yeah, you should have told us about such a good opportunity. You actually let us misunderstand you. I never thought that you would be so powerful. You actually have a relationship with the Limitless Palace. At this moment, everyone looked at Jilashua in a different light. The Limitless Palace was the champion of the Battle of Zhualu. In a short period of time, their name had spread far and wide. The current Limitless Palace was different from the past. Many people were racking their brains to enter the Limitless Palace. When the results of the Battle of Zhualu came out, many people were shocked. They were all secretly envious. If there was a day when they could enter the Limitless Palace, it would be an incredible identity. At first, they thought that after the Yu clan had encountered such a situation, their situation was already very bad. They never thought that there would be a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. Now, there was actually such a good opportunity in front of them. At this moment, Jilashua was also dumbfounded. She had chosen to believe in Xianyi, which was why she had come here. However, she had never thought that she would not see Xianyi here. Instead, she had seen people from Limitless Palace. Could it be that Xianyi had some sort of relationship with the people from Limitless Palace? Jilashua couldn't help but exclaim. She had long guessed that Xianyi's background wasn't simple, but she didn't expect her to have such a relationship with Limitless Palace. No wonder Xianyi didn't seem to care about Yu Ruilin. To think that she had maintained her status in front of Xianyi. In fact, Xianyi didn't even care about her background. Thinking of this, Jilashua couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. She had really displayed her slight skill in front of an expert. Chapter 26-25. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen stood quietly at the same spot. Looking at the changing emotions of the crowd, a faint and gentle smile appeared on their faces. Today, Limitless Palace's reputation had spread far and wide. 2 days ago, Bailey Hongzhuang heard from Nangong Wu that the number of disciples who wanted to enter Limitless Palace had greatly increased. As a competition between the major forces, the results of the battle for supremacy would have a huge impact every time. Compared to the previous times when Limitless Palace recruited disciples, this time was undoubtedly much livelier. And Bailey Hongzhuang was the biggest contributor to this. "This lady, may I know who you are?" Although Jilashua was happy to be able to enter Limitless Palace, they didn't even know who the other party was. To be able to bring such a large group of people into Limitless Palace, it wasn't something an ordinary person could do. The moment she said that, everyone's gaze landed on Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. So, Jilashua didn't know the two people in front of her. Then, could the other party be lying to them? Limitless Palace was a place where ordinary people could enter as they wished. "I'm the young palace mistress of Limitless Palace, Bailey Hongzhuang." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Her beautiful eyes were as clear as water as she calmly revealed her true identity. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Jilashua and everyone present were stunned. They looked at the beautiful woman in front of them in disbelief. Their hearts were filled with admiration. Heavens! She's Bailey Hongzhuang? The young palace mistress of Limitless Palace. We're actually so lucky to meet the young palace mistress of Limitless Palace. This time, the battle for supremacy was led by Bailey Hongzhuang. She obtained the first place. She's worthy of being called a genius. Everyone present had long heard of Bailey Hongzhuang's name, but they didn't expect to have the opportunity to see her in person. It was truly amazing. Limitless Palace's young palace master. There was a huge gap between their identities. They never thought that they would have the opportunity to speak with the young palace master of Limitless Palace. Furthermore, the young palace master of Limitless Palace had personally come to pick them up. Just thinking about it made them feel like they were dreaming. Jilashua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. She was even more confused now. Who exactly was Xianyi? To be able to get Limitless Palace's young palace master to pick them up, this was simply too unbelievable. Right now, Jilashua only hoped that she could see the announcement as soon as possible so that she could understand the reason behind all this. Let me say something. If everyone is determined to become a part of my Limitless Palace, then in the future, treat Limitless Palace wholeheartedly. If they had second thoughts, or if they wanted to return to the Yu clan, they could leave now. Chapter 26-26. Limitless Palace was a large sect, and its position in the Shangxian continent was self-evident. However, she had never heard of Limitless Palace's development in the field of medicine and poison. If she could only become a doctor in Limitless Palace without learning any exquisite medical skills, then there would be a gap between what she had imagined. After all, she had wanted to come to Xianyi's place to take a look because she felt that Xianyi must have a master who was better than Yu Xiqing in the field of medicine and poison. If she could follow such a master, even if she could not be accepted as a personal disciple, as long as she could learn some superficial knowledge, it would be enough for her to use for the rest of her life. Hearing Jilashua's words, the doctors and poison masters present could not help but frown. For the current them, most of them just wanted to find a better place to go, which was much better than wandering outside. As for whether or not they could learn more advanced medical and poison skills, it was not what they cared about the most. Everyone knew that Limitless Palace had only been established in the Shangxian continent for a short period of time, and they still lacked talents in many aspects. In terms of medical and poison skills, just thinking about it was enough to know. However, this situation had a certain advantage for them. Because there were fewer people, they would have an advantage if they went first. Wasn't Jilashua poking at his sore spot? If Limitless Palace did not have anyone, then wouldn't they not be able to go? Bailey Hongzhuang did not find Ji Lishua's question strange at all. She had been with Ji Lishua for such a long time, so she understood Ji Lishua's thoughts very well. This fellow had an obsession with medical skills that ordinary people could not understand. She only wanted to learn better medical skills. However, this kind of person was usually simpler. Let's not talk about other things. At the very least, we have someone in Limitless Palace who is better than Yu Siqing in medical and poison skills. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. When she mentioned Yu Siqing, her expression revealed traces of disdain. Yu Siqing claimed to be a master of medicine and poison, but in the end didn't she leave with her tail between her legs? When she said that, Ji Lishua and the rest's expression changed. They had never heard that Limitless Palace had such a master of medicine and poison. Ji Lishua's eyes gradually lit up. She suddenly understood that Xianyi should be someone from Limitless Palace, and the master behind Xianyi was most likely the person that Bailey Hongzhuang mentioned. If that was the case, then Limitless Palace was a better place for them than the Yu clan. At least, since the establishment of Limitless Palace, its reputation had always been good. Everyone present did not doubt Bailey Hongzhuang's words. The dignified Limitless Palace's young palace lord's words could not possibly be false. Palace Master, we Palace's Masters' Palace. Limitless Palace, Palace, Palace Palace. Limitless Palace 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 Palace. Of Limitless Palace Palace. Of Limitless Palace 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 Palace. Limitless and Limitless Palace Palace Palace. Palace Limitless Palace Limitless. Limitless. Everyone expressed their stance one after another, feeling that the exhaustion from these days was nothing. The Yu clan had encountered such a calamity, leaving them behind. This might have been predestined. The previous calamity was not a calamity at all. Everything was for their current fortune. Speaking of which, being able to have Limitless Palace's young palace master lead them up the mountain was already a supreme honor. Bailey Hongzhuang handed Ji Lishua and the others over to the elders. She didn't need to worry about the rest. A few days ago, after she had told her master and mistress about these matters, her master and mistress had already sent people to make arrangements. The Limitless Palace also had doctors and poison masters, but there weren't many of them. Now that Ji Lishua and the others were here, they could make up for it. Chapter 26-28. After Ji Lishua and the others settled down in Limitless Palace, Yu Linfeng also recruited 2 powerful doctors and poison masters to teach Ji Lishua and the others the art of healing and poison. Originally, there were still some deficiencies in this area, but with the Yu clan's medical books, this problem quietly disappeared. Moreover, learning the art of healing and poison wasn't something that could be completed in a short period of time. When the disciples of Limitless Palace found out that Bailey Hongzhuang had actually recruited a group of doctors and poison masters, they couldn't help but be surprised. Their young palace master was really resourceful. Even this kind of thing could be done so easily. At first, everyone didn't feel much. However, as cultivators, it was inevitable for them to get injured. Healing pills were extremely precious, so everyone was quite frugal on normal days. Ever since they had doctors to treat them for free, it was a great help to them. Although poison masters weren't of much use on normal days, if they could obtain some poisons when they went out to train, it would be of great use at critical moments. Long Xianjing and the others had always admired Bailey Hongzhuang. Now that they had Bailey Hongzhuang, Limitless Palace was like a tiger that had grown wings. When they recruited some new disciples next year, they could imagine that Limitless Palace would develop better and better in the future. However, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't appear in front of the other disciples after this. Bailey Hongzhuang was busy cultivating on the heaven stairway. She had to work hard to reach the 8th level of the Blue Realm before she went to the Long clan. Only by reaching a higher level could she obtain more benefits from the divine pond of ice and snow. Moreover, she didn't have much time to continue cultivating. Soon she would have to go to the Lan clan again. When Yumanlan and the people of the Yu clan appeared in front of the Lan clan members, the Lan clan members couldn't react for a moment. They didn't understand the situation in front of them. Lan Jingquang and the Lan clan elders stared blankly at the Yu clan in front of them. What happened? Yumanlan looked at Lan Jingquang with a slightly awkward expression. She didn't know how to explain the situation to Lan Jingquang. Father-in-law, let's go in first. Even though he was full of doubts, Lan Jingquang could only temporarily suppress it in his heart. He couldn't let Yu Taotian and the others wait outside the door. Yu Taotian nodded and led the group of Yu clan elders into the Lan clan. Before Lan Jingquang left, he gave Yumanlan a look that contained a hint of warning. He was already terribly busy in the Lan clan. He didn't expect such a situation to happen. Although he didn't know what had happened, he could only hope that there wouldn't be any more trouble. He could only hope that there wouldn't be any trouble. Since the Yu clan master had suddenly arrived, the Lan clan master, Lan Hongtai, couldn't continue his closed-door training anymore, so he followed him to the assembly hall. But of. Chapter 26-29. Yumanlan panicked. She knew that Lan Jingquang would be angry when he found out. However, she couldn't control what had happened. It was as if from the beginning until now, the initiative was either in Lan Jingquang's hands or the Yu clan's hands. Her thoughts were completely meaningless. Right now Lan Jingquang didn't have the time. If he did, she could imagine being scolded by Lan Jingquang again. This feeling was really unbearable. Yumanlan couldn't help but think of Mu Lingbing. Back when Lan Yunxiao was so glorious, Mu Lingbing's words also carried a certain weight. Even when Lan Yunxiao and Yumanlan were imprisoned for so long, Lan Yunxiao still protected Mu Lingbing. She just couldn't understand why the gap between her and Mu Lingbing was so big. Lan Clan Conference Hall. When Lan Hongtai arrived at the conference hall, he found it full of Lan and Yu clan elders. With a quick glance, Lan Hongtai was sure that all the elders of the Yu clan were here. Along the way, Lan Hongtai listened to Lan Borong's report and had some doubts. The Yu clan had mobilized so many people. It looked like they were fleeing for their lives. However, the Yu clan was such a huge clan. It was strange to think about it. Yu Taotian hurriedly stood up when he saw Lan Hongtai. His face was full of smiles. Lan clan head, sorry to disturb you today. You're too polite. We welcome you with open arms. There was a faint smile on Lan Hongtai's face, but his eyes showed a bit of alienation. These years he spent most of his time in seclusion and didn't pay much attention to ordinary matters. When Lan Jingquang married Yumanlan, he had a good impression of the Yu clan. However, after the incident with Lan Yunxiao, the Yu clan and Lan Jingquang joined forces and left Lan Yishuan in the lurch. Just this alone filled him with dissatisfaction and resentment towards the Yu clan. If Lan Yunxiao hadn't colluded with the Yu clan, then the incident wouldn't have happened. When he came out of seclusion and found out about this, he had already fallen out with Yu Taotian. This was a conspiracy between the Yu clan and Lan Jingquang. It was inevitable that they would be very unhappy with each other. Both sides were also looking at each other coldly. According to his plan, he wanted to draw a line between himself and the Yu clan, and never have any contact with them again. However, Lan Yunxiao's departure had already dealt a blow to the Lan family's reputation. If they were to draw a line with the Yu family, the Lan family's situation would be even worse. At that time, Lan Jingquang had already expected Lan Hongtai's attitude, so he joined forces with the other elders to resist. Under such circumstances, Lan Hongtai, as the patriarch, could not go against the wishes of all the elders. He could only put this matter aside. However, all these years they had always been at odds with each other on the surface. The smiles on their faces at this moment were just perfunctory. Clan Master Yu, I wonder if something has happened for all of you to come here together? As the great elder of the Lan clan, Lan Borong was the first to ask. The other party had brought a large group of people with him. That didn't seem right. Chapter 26:30. It's a long story. As Yu Taotian spoke, he couldn't help but look at Lan Jingquang. He was very clear about his relationship with Lan Hongtai. Fortunately, Lan Jingquang's position in the Lan clan was not low. As long as Lan Jingquang was willing to help, the Yu clan would have no problem staying in the Lan clan. Our Yu clan has suffered a huge blow this time. Yu Taotian slowly told them about what had happened in the Yu clan. They couldn't hide this news even if they wanted to. However, it had only been a short time since the incident happened. Hence, many forces had not received the news yet. Moreover, they had traveled very quickly on their way here. They were afraid that others would know about this news. If they were to be surrounded and intercepted on the way, the situation would be terrible. In fact, they had been worried the entire time on their journey. However, they were relieved when they reached the Lan clan. Now that they were here, their enemies wouldn't be able to take this opportunity to attack them. After Yu Taotian told them about what had happened in the Yu clan, Lan Hongtai and the elders of the Lan clan couldn't help but change their expressions. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. The other party had just infiltrated the Yu clan and the entire Yu clan had collapsed? Some of them couldn't help but swallow their saliva. The other party's methods were too shocking. The Lan clan had been in close contact with the Yu clan all these years. They were very clear about the Yu clan's background and power. They didn't expect the other party to break it so easily. If this news were to spread, the entire Shangxian continent would be shaken. Such an opponent was simply too terrifying. The scariest thing was that the Yu clan was already in such a state and they still didn't know who their opponent was. The so-called Xianyi was obviously not the other party's real name. In the vast Shangxian continent, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find such a person. Originally, the Lan clan members were speechless when they saw so many people coming to the Yu clan. Now that they knew that these were all the remaining people of the Yu clan, they felt that there were too few people left. In such a large cultivation aristocratic family, the number of direct descendants and branch descendants was extremely large. Now that there were only a few people left, the Yu clan had suffered a huge blow. When Lan Jingquang heard all of this, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. This was like a bolt from the blue, making his situation even worse. Lan Qingyan's injuries had not healed for a long time. When he returned to the Lan clan, he had to deal with some elders who had other ideas. Luckily, he still had the Yu clan as a helper. Who would have thought that not only would the Yu clan not be able to help him, they would even become his burden. Wouldn't this make his situation even more difficult? The other party's poison technique is so powerful that even Grandmaster Yu Xiqing is unable to neutralize it? Yu clan's second elder, Lan Kaiqing, still felt that this matter was a little unimaginable. Wasn't Yu Xiqing known as the #1 person in the art of medicine and poison? If it was a violent attack, the Yu clan might not be able to block it. However, with Yu Xiqing in charge, there should be no need to be afraid of poison. Hearing Lan Kaiqing's words, Yu Xiqing's expression was a little awkward. Chapter 26:31. The other party's poison skills are a level higher than mine. Although she didn't want to admit it, it didn't matter if she didn't admit it at this point. Following Yu Xiqing's words, the expressions of the Lan clan members changed again. They couldn't help but ponder. In this case, they had many things to consider. Even Yu Xiqing couldn't compare to the other party's poison skills. If the other party wanted to kill the entire Yu clan, it would be impossible to guard against it. No matter what, no one should underestimate the strength of a poison master, especially a poison master who had reached the pinnacle of the art of poison. By the time one noticed the other party's poison, it would already be too late. They didn't know how the Yu clan provoked such a terrifying poison master, but at least the Lan clan didn't want to provoke him. Now that the Yu clan had come to the Lan clan, if the poison master wasn't willing to let them go, Wouldn't the Lan clan be in trouble? For a moment, the expressions of the Lan clan elders kept changing. This was big trouble. After hearing all this, Lan Hongtai felt a little happy in his heart. All these years, the Yu clan relied on their powerful poison skills to be extremely arrogant. There were many cases of them harming others. Now retribution had come. He didn't have any pity for the Yu clan. Ever since the Yu clan extended their evil claws to Lan Yunxiao, all the affection between them had disappeared. Lan Jingquang and his people were all dumbfounded. Who would have thought that the situation would be so serious? This was a malignant tumor that could explode at any time. Lan Jingquang's face was as gloomy as water. His pitch-black eyes were even more oppressive. Lan clan head, we have been allies for so many years. Now that we are in trouble, you have to help us. Yu Taotian had no choice but to put down his pride. If the Lan clan didn't help now, they really didn't know what to do. The Lan clan elders all looked at Lan Hongtai. At this time it was obvious that Lan Hongtai had to make the decision. Yu clan head, the trouble you have caused this time is too big. With the strength of the Lan clan, I'm afraid it will be difficult to resist. Lan Hongtai's expression was calm and unhurried. It was just like how the Yu clan didn't save his granddaughter. It wasn't that he didn't want to take revenge, but that it wasn't time yet. This karmic cycle was really interesting. Back then, the Yu clan had also rejected many people like this. As soon as Lan Hongtai said that, Yu Taotian's expression changed drastically. His eyes turned gloomy and it was hard to tell if he was happy or angry. In his heart, he was cursing Lan Hongtai the bastard. However, with the current situation of the Yu clan, he had no other choice but to seek help from the Lan clan. He could only beg for their help. Yu Xiqing frowned as a fierce look appeared in her black eyes. Lan family head, all these years, our Yu clan has helped you a lot. Now that we're in trouble, you're burning the bridge after crossing the river. Isn't this a little unreasonable? Hearing this, Lan Hongtai couldn't help but sneer. Grandmaster Yu Xiqing, it seems that the number of treasures you've taken from our Lan family has only increased. As early as 19 years ago, Lan Hongtai no longer wanted to pay attention to this so-called in-law. However, due to the opinions of his family members, he could only endure it. Now that things had come to this, he naturally didn't want to bother with them. Chapter 2632. Following Lan Hongtai's words, Yu Xiqing's face turned cold. Anger was brewing in her eyes, as if she would explode at any moment. Lan Jingquang, what do you say about this? Seeing that Lan Hongtai was unwilling to respond, Yu Taotian could only turn his attention to Lan Jingquang. He was furious. As the Yu clan head, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? If Lan Jingquang was more capable and became the Lan clan head, he wouldn't have to give in to Lan Hongtai. They had already helped where they could. They thought that after getting rid of Lan Yunxiao, this new problem, Lan Jingquang would be able to become the clan head without any mishaps. They didn't expect Lan Hongtai to be so stubborn and unwilling to let Lan Jingquang become the clan head. All these years, although Lan Jingquang's position in the Lan clan wasn't much different from that of the clan head, there was still a gap. At least Lan Jingquang couldn't be the clan head at this time. Seeing that Yu Taotian had turned the question to him, Lan Jingquang was conflicted. Under such circumstances, if he agreed, it would undoubtedly bring trouble to the entire Lan clan. If he didn't agree, Yu Taotian wouldn't let it go. Lan Hongtai's expression was indifferent. This matter was caused by Lan Jingquang himself. As for this son, he didn't have any feelings for him after that incident. Even Lan Hongtai himself found it hard to accept that he had such a cruel and merciless son. Father-in-law, this, Lan Jingquang muttered to himself. This matter had happened too suddenly. He didn't know how to deal with it at the moment. The Lan clan situation was unpredictable. If he didn't handle it carefully, there would be trouble. Yu Taotian's expression turned uglier when he saw that Lan Jingquang was also hesitating. Lan Jingquang, our Yu clan has helped you so much. If you burn the bridge after crossing the river, you're too despicable. Hearing Yu Taotian's accusation, Lan Jingquang hurriedly said, Father-in-law, this matter happened too suddenly. We need time to think about it. His mind was in a mess and he didn't know how to make a decision. When Yu Taotian saw that Lan Jingquang was still somewhat fearful of him, his gloomy face became slightly better. In the end, everyone from the Yu clan stayed in the Lan clan for the time being, while the elders of the Lan clan had to properly discuss how to deal with this matter. No one wanted to get involved in such a big trouble. However, the relationship between the Yu clan and them had always been good. If they just ignored it like this, it would be detrimental to their reputation. Patriarch, now that the Yu clan's people are here, if we just chase them away like this, wouldn't we be too heartless? Lan Jingquang looked at Lan Hongtai awkwardly. He had no other choice. Lan Hongtai's face was cold. I have already said that I will draw a clear line with the Yu clan. It was you who kept saying that we should keep in touch. Now do you know what it means to eat your own medicine? His words were clearly aimed at Lan Jingquang. The other elders who had supported Lan Jingquang back then were silent as well. You're tuning into the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.